how's it going, guys? This is CRP speaking to you live. And I'm going to be doing the weekly webinar number 63 for June 12th, 2021. This is called Reading the Tea Leaves. And as usual, do me a favor. Can you hit the 12th, 2021? Oops, sorry about that. My mistake. I did a little snafu here, but apparently you guys can hear me. Let me just get a +1 from you all to make sure that you can hear me, that you hear and see me. Yeah, we're going to be talking about reading the tea leaves, and I'm looking forward to this broadcast because you see, I'm going to be talking about some things that have been going on. Great to see that people can hear me properly. I'm going to be talking about some things that have been going on, but more than talking about things specifically, I want you to take from this webinar an approach to how to read the news and analyze current information that's going on, okay? Because as you've no doubt noticed, you know, the mainstream media is just a propaganda tool at this point. And we are not getting the relevant information about a whole host of different things. Things that are declared a conspiracy theory, you know, 6 months to a year later turn out to be true. Things that are people swear up and down are true turn out to be lies. And so it is necessary for people in the West, and I cannot believe that I'm about to say this, but it is necessary for people in the West to discard and discount just about every bit of mainstream news and try to see through it to figure out what's actually going on, because you cannot take any news at face value, not anymore. There have just been too many lies, too many obfuscations, just too much bullshit, okay? And so you're going to have to read the tea leaves. And I'm going to go through this whole presentation, but I want to make clear before I get into it. I'm going to make this clear during the presentation, but I want to start off by saying that I am not endorsing conspiracy theory bullshit, okay? You guys know me well enough to know that I believe in a few things to be true. I believe that Elvis is dead and Paul McCartney is alive. I believe that man walked on the moon and that the earth is round, okay? And I have proof for each and every one of these observations, okay? And so I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't truck with conspiracy theories generally. What I am saying, though, is that we are, in the democracies in the West, in an environment such that accurate information about reality is hard to come by. And any kind of analysis, accurate analysis of what's going on, well, we're each going to have to do it ourselves. Because what is happening, and this is frightening, is that people who are analyzing the current data are often as not being deplatformed and silenced and censored. And then later it turns out that they were right. So to understand what's really going on, you have to read the tea leaves. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But I just want to emphasize this because I'm very, very leery of being thought of as any kind of conspiracy theorist. I'm not, okay? I think that conspiracy theories many times are very amusing and thought-provoking, sort of like counterfactual history, something that gives you a lot to think about. But I don't buy conspiracies for the simple reason that I know that few people can keep a secret. I know that because of experience, that when there is a conspiracy going on, eventually somebody talks. It's inevitable. There is no such thing as a secret if two people know it, okay? If two people know a secret, it's not going to be a secret for long. And if it's more, and if it's something important, eventually people talk. They always talk, okay? So I want to make that very, very clear before I get going in this presentation. Now I'm going to close out my my image, because it's not important that you guys see me, but it is important that you guys, well, you know, you can just listen to me. You know, that you don't really have to be reading this. So anyway, let's get cracking. As usual, here is the full outline of today's presentation. Now, when I was growing up in the 1970s, we were in the middle of the Cold War. And the Cold War was this big old competition, this dig-quagging competition between the USSR and the United States and its Western allies, Western Europe specifically, NATO and whatnot. On the Soviet side, there was the Warsaw Pact, but the Soviet Union was, for all intents and purposes, a unified empire that encompassed Eastern Europe and half of Central Europe. And because these two blocks were nuclear armed and they had intercontinental ballistic missiles that could potentially bring about the end of the world, there was a Cold War as opposed to a hot war. Cold War being that there was a lot of confrontation, but not open warfare breaking out. And what happened was that, especially up to the time of Stalin, the Soviets were extremely secretive, and they were successfully secretive. That is, information rarely leaked out of the Soviet Union. And some huge atrocities remained secret for decades, and finally started coming out in the decades of the 1960s and 70s, and then the 80s. And then, of course, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, everything came out. But the point, after the death of Stalin in, what was it, 53? Nikita Khrushchev rose to power, and he brought about greater openness in the Soviet Union. And then during the stagnant period of the 1960s and 70s and into the 80s, during the Brezhnev era, well, there were a whole bunch of different factions. And this was the period when Kremlinologists rose to prominence. Kremlinologists was the informal word for historians and analysts who had a great deal of experience with Russia. Most of them knew Russian and could read Russian, and they would analyze the different bits of information coming out of the Soviet Union to try to piece together what was the real motivation of the various factions inside the Soviet Union. Because after Stalin, which was the final cult of personality in the Soviet Union, the Soviet leadership was very leery of allowing another Stalin to rise to power. And so what happened was that during the period of Khrushchev and Brezhnev, the Soviet Union was really ruled by a bunch of different factions. It wasn't merely committees, but factions. Different factions jockeying for position. And it was very hard to figure out what was going on because none of this was public. It was all private, and there were only these little hints popping up here and there in the newspaper here, in the declaration of some minister over there. And so the Kremlinologists in the West, these experts, most of them were historians or long-term analysts, these guys would read the tea leaves incessantly, trying to figure out what was going on. By the way, if you don't know, the expression reading the tea leaves comes from an ancient way of divination, of prognostication, where people would pour tea into a cup, and then they would empty it, and they would flip over the cup, and they would see how the tea leaves would sink and appear on the bit of paper, okay? It was just a ridiculous way of looking into the future, but all of them are ultimately ridiculous. I mean, think about it. Looking into a crystal ball, is anything dumber than that? Anyway, reading the tea leaves is what the Kremlinologists were doing. They were trying to figure out what was going on because clear, transparent information was not coming out of the Soviet Union. Now, something similar is going on in the United States. To a lesser extent, it's going on in all the major nations of the Western democracies, but particularly in the United States. It's like the Soviet Russia during the Brezhnev era. It's very opaque. It's not clear what's going on. And it's like various factions are fighting behind the scenes, but what is going on is just not clear at all. Because what's going on in the United States is that there is, on the one hand, a concentration of power among the elites, the 1%, not just economic 1%, but also social and political and bureaucratic 1%. But at the same time, there's a power vacuum. Now, when you say power vacuum, it gives the impression that there's nobody, that there's no power at the top. But no, it means that there's no single leader. There's no unified leadership. There are various factions that have most of the political, economic, social, bureaucratic power. But these various factions are not unified. And this is something that you have to understand if you look at the United States today. These various factions are not unified. And that's why a lot of times they pursue contradictory interests. Now, let me give you a specific example. I'm just going to focus on the US White House right now. The White House, of course, is the head of the executive branch of the American government. Now, right now, there are three factions, clearly identified factions at the White House. Number one, there is the Biden family, the immediate family members led by Jill Biden, not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is, for all intents and purposes, he's senile. He's gone. He's out to lunch. Nobody knows where the fuck that guy is, right? Jill Biden leads the Biden family faction. Now, you got to understand that the Biden family are exceedingly corrupt. I mean, the Hunter Biden emails make it very clear that all of these sinecures that the Biden family members got, they would kick 10% back upstairs to the quote unquote old man. Who the fuck you think that was? That was Joe Biden. Okay. Joe Biden made a lot of money off of his family members, positioning them in different businesses and different projects, government run organizations and whatnot. For instance, Hunter Biden, through the emails, we know that he was getting something like $500,000 a month from Burisma, the energy company from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And so because of that corruption, the Biden family is a serious faction within the White House because they want to both continue their grift and they want to make sure that none of this comes back to hurt them, at least doesn't come back to hurt Jill and Joe Biden, okay? Because it can. That's a key issue. Because their grift, their graft, all of the corruption of that family is so egregious and has so many tentacles that there are a whole bunch of different groups, foreign groups, that have dirt on the Biden family that could potentially destroy them. And the Biden family is very aware of this. So the Biden family is one group, one faction in the White House. Now, another faction in the White House is the Obama people, led by Barack Obama. Barack Obama is living in New York in a big estate, but he is actively participating in the governance of the United States by way of his proxies, by way of the various advisors that are in the Biden administration. Do keep in mind that it was Barack Obama who put Kamala Harris as the VP. Kamala Harris had no fucking future. She was dead in the water. She got blown the fuck out in the primaries. She was blown the fuck out by Tulsi Gabbard in the first fucking debate of the Democratic primaries. But Kamala Harris, managed to score the VP slot, and which will mean that she will eventually be president of the United States, because it's very clear that Joe Biden, he is on his last legs. I mean, he is. Come on, let's be real here. She will be the next president of the United States, and she is the finger puppet of Barack Obama. Barack Obama and his faction, they view the Biden administration as the Obama third term. And they are doing everything in their power to continue the Obama policies. Now, there is a third faction. The third faction is the hard leftists, who are pushing for various hard left policies, universal basic income, putting in the whole woke ideology throughout the government, purging the military of anyone who might be pro-Trump or at least pro-nationalist. I mean, i.e., they want to turn the military into the wokester fest, okay? Now, that's the third faction. The fourth faction are the entrenched warmongering bureaucrats, the neocon bureaucrats, people like John Brennan, James Clapper, that whole crowd, who want another war. They want a big war, and they are supported by various factions outside of the White House. But you got to understand, inside the White House, there are these four factions that are jockeying for position. And if you understand anything about American politics in the White House, you have to understand that it has broken down into factions. And I'm discussing and analyzing just the White House faction to understand where it's, what's going on. But this is happening in every power center in America. Every power center is at once highly concentrated, but yet, totally split up among various factions, very powerful factions. And so you can see these different factions because of the contradictory moves that, for instance, in the case that I've just discussed, the White House does periodically. Example, recently, there was the whole April offensive against Russia, which I discussed. Now I'll discuss a little bit more in just a bit. Now, I discussed that in a previous webinar. Now, this April offensive was on multiple fronts, and what happened was that it failed, but that's not important. During the April offensive and in the aftermath of the failure of the April offensive, the Joe Biden administration, when it realized that it had failed in the April offensive to dislodge or at least hurt somehow Putin, and Putin outplayed them, well, the Biden administration reached out to Putin for a summit meeting which is going to happen, I do believe, tomorrow or the day after. They reached out for a summit meeting, and yet the next day they imposed more sanctions on Russia and Russian individuals who are close to Putin. Now, if leadership in the White House were unified, these contradictory moves would not have been made. On the one hand, you have reaching out to Putin in a conciliatory manner, and then on the other hand, imposing sanctions in a very aggressive, not to say brutalist move. These kinds of contradictory moves would not happen in a unified leadership. And in fact, they do not make any sense whatsoever if you assume that there is unified leadership in the White House. But if you assume that leadership in the White House is factional, there are different factions in the White House, then it makes complete sense. And if you can analyze the different factions and understand which ones they are and understand their motivations, then it makes complete sense, because there was the April offensive, which is clear was when all the factions in the White House were all unified. And I'll get to that in just a second. It's not important for now to go into the specifics of that. It's just necessary for you to accept the assumption that I will defend later, that all the factions were unified. The April offensive happened. It failed. Clearly it failed. There was one faction that decided that it was smart to reach out to Putin, try to make friends with Russia. Clearly, that would have been the Biden family faction, because they know that the Russians have the dirt on Biden family corruption, and they're very afraid of it. So the Biden family probably pushed for the summit. The Obama administration probably pushed for a summit as well. The Obama faction, rather, pushed for a summit as well. But then the entrenched bureaucrats probably pushed for the sanctions. They were probably opposed to a summit meeting, and they were unsuccessful in stopping the request for a summit meeting, but therefore they were able to succeed in imposing sanctions, because they were able to say to the other factions, well, we gave you the offer for a summit, so we should, speak softly and carry a big stick, so we should show the Russians that we're strong. And so the other factions gave way and allowed the neocon warmongering faction in the White House to impose these sanctions. You see how it's going? And now, this that I'm telling you, by the way, a lot of people are coming to more or less the same conclusion, that this is more or less what's going on in the White House. In the White House, just the White House. Okay? So if you look at the actions of the White House, they were contradictory. But if you look at the White House as broken up into factions, and each of the factions pursuing different goals, then it makes complete sense. Then the moves make total sense. You see? Now, what I'm arguing in this webinar is that you should analyze, and we should all analyze, all things that are going on in the West, in the different Western democracies, as a breakdown of unified leadership and as rampant factionalism. That's the point of this webinar. I mean, that's what I want you to be thinking about when this webinar is over. When you look at the news of any Western country, you have to think to yourself that there are different factions pursuing different goals. Sometimes those goals line up, and sometimes those goals are contradictory. But since power has been concentrated, but the power concentration is not unified, but divided, then it makes sense why the Western countries are pursuing contradictory goals at different times, and then sometimes being, all on the same page. That's what I want you to be thinking about, and that's what I mean when I say read the tea leaves. Don't look at what's happening, but rather look at what's happening, and often as not, look at what's not happening or what's not being said, and try from that information to deduce or to infer what the various factions are pursuing in the different power centers of the West. Because the key issue of this whole situation right now that we're living in is that there is a complete breakdown of the unity of purpose in the United States and the Western democracies. That is, they don't know where to go. That's why there are all these factions. Understand, go back in history. After the end of the Second World War, the beginning of the Cold War, all of the various factions were very unified. We have to fight the communists. The communists are the enemy. And so all of the various factions in the Western democracies were allied, were all on the same page, and they pursued more or less the same objectives. That's why there wasn't that great of a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, because they believed more or less the same thing. They were unified. There were specific issues that they were divided on, but in general, they all had the same ultimate goals: the defeat of the Soviet Union. But today, we don't have that anymore, especially after the catastrophic end of the War on Terror. Because the War on Terror, we can all agree, is over. The War on Terror created unity. But see, fighting terror, that's like fighting flanking maneuvers. It's stupid, see? Because terrorism is merely a tactic. And the enemy that was using terrorism against the United States, i.e. the Taliban and extreme Islamism, it's too trivial of an enemy, okay? It couldn't last. And the George W. Bush administration tried to create the so-called axis of evil so as to lump together several disparate enemies into one enemy, Iran, North Korea, the Taliban, and whatnot. It didn't really work, not long-term at any rate. And see, now we are coming to that point where the War on Terror failed, and we have these disparate factions. And the American founding fathers looked at factionalism as the greatest potential problem for the American Republic, and they were right. Factionalism is catastrophic, but factionalism was able to be postponed because of various historical reasons in the United States. Number one was the growth westward of the country. See, the industrial expansion and growth westward of the United States subsumed the different contradictions of the different factions in America, because they were all aiming during the 19th century, especially the early 19th century, into conquering this huge empty continent. The North American continent was empty because of course, all the Native Americans who had died because of all of these diseases that they had no protection against. It's estimated that between 90 and 95% of the Native American population died from disease. And disease that wasn't the fault of the Europeans. They didn't mean to bring these diseases. It was simply that the Native Americans had been isolated for so many thousands of years that pathogens that had developed in Asia and Europe, and which people in the Asian continent and the European continent, as well as the African continent, had some defenses against. Well, the people in the American continent had no defenses against these diseases, and that's why they got wiped out. I mean, they got their revenge with STDs, syphilis and whatnot, which developed in the American continent and passed on to Europe and Asia. But, the damage is done. And anyway, the Americans were unified during the 19th century as they conquered the North American continent. Then following the Civil War, they were unified once again in the pursuit of industrialization. During the early 20th century, that factionism started to rear its ugly head until the Great Depression. The Great Depression and then the subsequent Second World War it's not so much that the Great Depression ended factionalism, okay? But what happened was that it was managed somewhat better, though the incorrect management of the economy by the Roosevelt administration, which was responding to the different factions in its own government, led to the prolonging and deepening of the Great Depression. But the Second World War, like all great and difficult wars, well, it unified the country. And there was unity during the Second World War and following the Second World War because of the Soviet threat, which was a real threat. And so because of the World War II and the Soviet threat, there was a sense of shared purpose and unity for 70 years. But it was only around 2010 where the war on terror was clearly a failure. It was starting in 2010 that we started to get all these factions. And now they are really blooming. I mean, this is like a fucking outbreak of herpes, motherfucker. These different factions, they are killing the body politic of the United States. Okay? Now, the various factions, a key component of this problem with the various factions is that not only is there a concentration of power, there is zero accountability for the abuses of the various factions. Zero accountability legally, financially, and morally. They can do whatever the fuck they want, and they get away with it consistently. And you might say that, what about cancel culture? Cancel culture is accountability, right? Well, cancel culture for the most part is for the fucking plebes. It's for the small fry, people on fucking Twitter who say stupid shit. It's not for people who have real power, not for people who are in any one of these big factions. Cancel culture doesn't come for them. If it does come for them, it's usually because they've fallen out of favor in their own faction. And this is important when I discuss Fauci and Bill Gates. You see, the cancel culture, when it is applied to somebody who's in good standing in any one of these factions, it's usually because they've fallen afoul of that faction. And there are two reasons for it. Or let me phrase it, there's only one reason for it. It's usually because that person, that insider in some particular faction, is the leader or the head of a losing battle within the faction. Okay? That man lost an internal battle, and he's being quote unquote canceled, i.e., he's becoming the sacrificial lamb, or the head that is posted outside the walls of the castle, because he lost an internal skirmish that has nothing to do with the reason he's being canceled. And here I'm positing something, okay? This is an assumption I'm making, that the guy who gets canceled, like Bill Gates, like Anthony Fauci, it's not because of the sin that they're supposed to have committed. It's because they got caught on the wrong side of an issue within the faction. And what that issue is what we have to figure out. But it's not because, in the case of Bill Gates, because, he hit on some random Microsoft chicks back in 1975 or some shit like that. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has something to do with something that's going on now. Okay? Okay. Now, the news media, key about the news media are not reporting the truth. Simple as that. And it's very fucking obvious. I mean, anybody who doubts it, come on, what the fuck is the matter with you? They're not reporting the truth, but only what's approved of by the dominant factions. Notice, by the dominant factions, okay? The mainstream media is, in fact, actively suppressing the truth, either by lies or by omission. And that's a fact. That it is inescapable. To pretend otherwise is just foolish. And to give a very simple example, what happened with the whole Wuhan lab theory, virus lab theory. There were reasonable people, and you guys remember it, me included, who said, hey, this shit probably came from a lab. The lab is right the fuck there in that fucking city, right? And everybody who said that was labeled a conspiracy theorist by the mainstream media. And when I say mainstream media, I'm including the tech social media companies like Facebook and YouTube. That opinion was declared verboten, i.e., they actively lied and suppressed information, and they made sure to omit that information or that possibility to their audience. And then later, well, it turned out to be true. Okay, or at least it's now being allowed to be thought of as true. I mean, I still don't know. We will never know. I think it is a reasonable inference to think that the virus came from this lab. Do I believe that 100%? No. I believe it like 85 to 90% true that it came from a lab. It could well be that it came out of a farmer's market or a wet market or whatever the fuck it was. It could be that, or it could be some third possibility. I don't think that that's likely. I think the likelihood is much more of it being a lab leak, right? But now they're saying like 100% certainty that it's a lab leak. And a year ago, they were saying 100% certainty it's not a lab leak. So you see what's going on here. It's always black and white, and the changes from one to the other are extreme. And that's propaganda. And the mainstream media is all about propaganda. And they are pushing the narrative that various factions are pushing. Now, here comes another issue. See, different factions are pushing different ideas in different mainstream media outlets. Sometimes one media outlet will be the mouthpiece of several different factions, like CNN, for instance. They put out news that comes from different factions in the different power centers in America. And so it's hard to figure out whom they're speaking for. But you have to understand it. You have to understand that this is what's going on. Because, like, for instance, there are some media outlets that are clearly speaking for one faction or another. Okay? Like, for instance, the CNBC. CNBC is the financial news organ of the financial world. I don't pay attention to it at all because I know it's bullshit. Because they are the mouthpiece of the big banks. They are a news outlet that pushes the narrative of the big banks to keep the retail customers docile and compliant and shoveling in their money into the big banks and into the roulette that is the equities and market. Okay? And so that's why I don't pay attention to CNNBC rather, but I know who they represent. For every mainstream news outlet, you have to figure out whom they are representing, which faction, which power center they are a mouthpiece of. You cannot take it at face value that they are independent, because practically no news organization is independent at this point. Okay? You got to realize that from the get-go. Okay. Now, let me phrase it. It's not an issue of bias. See? It's not bias. They are actively the mouthpieces of certain factions. Because, as you can see in my outline, I mentioned 3 news organizations that I follow, which I suggest you do too. Zero Hedge, the Duran/Alexander Mercouris, and Sticks Hex and Hammer 666. The 3 of them have biases, but a bias, a personal bias, a personal antipathy or sympathy, that's very different from a propagandistic approach to news. Okay? I mean, you got to understand the difference here, because we all have biases. We all prefer one thing over the other. I mean, insofar as news is concerned, we tend to side with one group over another. It's perfectly natural. It's a human quality. It's no big deal. But there's a big difference between a bias and sort of like a preference, and sort of like, because of this preference, because of this bias, you sort of like tend to spin a little bit things in one direction or another. That's one thing. Another thing is to be an outright mouthpiece of a faction. Mainstream news outlets, they are all mouthpieces. Those 3 that I mentioned, they're the only ones that are more or less on the level. They could be biased on certain issues, which I believe they are, but it's a natural bias as opposed to a propagandistic approach to news. Okay? Oh, and the other ones, of course, are Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald. I should have put them in there. I mean, I always forget to put them in because they're the ones I follow the most carefully. And so it's so natural. Let me, I can't rewrite that now while I'm doing the broadcast, but to news organizations, just add up Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald. By the way, just to pause a little bit, because I'm always paranoid about this shit. Can you guys all hear me properly and see the outline properly? Why don't you give me a +1, if you will? I'd appreciate it. I'll wait for you guys to catch up. and I'll just scan real quick the chat. Hey, Alfred, how's it going? Well, whose other names do I recognize there? Yeah, you guys can. Yeah, okay, great. You guys can all hear me. Terrific. I'll just cut out and go back to what I was saying. Okay, so to continue, the news media are not reporting the truth, but only what's approved of by the dominant factions. Okay. Now, right now, several things are happening which don't make sense. Okay. Number one is the 180 on Bill Gates. Shit, until like 4 months ago, Bill Gates was like 3 months ago, 90 days ago. Bill Gates was like the second coming of Jesus Christ, for crying out loud. You know, he was this guy who knew everything, and he was this big brain, and he was going to save us all, and vaccines and blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden, the 180 on him, and all of a sudden, have you noticed he's disappeared? He's just gone. Nobody's talking about him. Okay. He was all of a sudden getting divorced from his wife. And then all of a sudden, all this shit was coming out, you know, Me Too garbage. I mean, they were saying that he had created an uncomfortable work environment because he'd asked a few women back in the day that worked for him at Microsoft to go out on dates. And that's how he got his fucking wife. His wife was an employee of his before they started dating, right? And nobody said shit about that. But now all of a sudden, oh my God, he asked some people who worked for him to go out on dates. And they all described it as very awkward and you know, uncomfortable inducing. And, you know, you read it and it was like perfectly like, it was like, hey, would you like to have dinner with me? And a polite reply was no, or oh, okay, that's fine. And that was it. Okay. I mean, it doesn't seem particularly awkward to me, but be that as it may. This guy, Bill Gates, all of a sudden he's on the outs, and now he's all of a sudden gone. I mean, fucking gone. What the fuck is that all about? For the past year, most of 2020, he was like this genius. And a lot of people who were considered conspiracy theorist loons had pointed out that he had essentially been outlining the response to COVID-19 in 2019, okay? And all of a sudden this shit happened, and what the fuck is that all about, right? But Bill Gates, he was the second coming of Christ, and then he was vilified, and then now he's just non-personed. Nobody's talking about him. But not non-personed like Bill Cosby got non-personed. Non-personed like, you know, just ignored. Like he doesn't exist anymore. Have you noticed that? Nobody's talking about him. And that doesn't make sense because, see, a guy like Bill Gates will have a public relations firm. And if they're talking shit about him, the public relations firm is going to go out there and put a lot of effort to put in to people who will rebut allegations and whatnot. But a PR firm can't make news disappear about a guy. They can counteract the narrative, but they can't prevent people from talking about Bill Gates. But all of a sudden, the mainstream media, poof, not talking about him anymore. Now, the defenestration of Anthony Fauci. All of a sudden, Anthony Fauci is being just thrown out the fucking window. And it behooves me to think that this is organic. I mean, BuzzFeed and the Washington Post got these emails from Fauci. BuzzFeed, this left-wing outlet, the Washington Post, which belongs to Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos, of course, has very close ties to the CIA because Amazon Web Services does a lot of work for the CIA. They are a huge contract for AWS. And so all of a sudden, the Washington Post is throwing shit at Anthony Fauci, not to mention BuzzFeed, which is a leftist organization. I mean, a quote-unquote Justice Democrat, hard left organization. What the fuck is going on? Anthony Fauci was also, you know, Saint Tony of the COVID. And all of a sudden, they're throwing him out the window. What the fuck is that all about? Apart from that, there's a sudden acknowledgement that COVID virus probably came from this Chinese virus lab, right? And there's this UFO idiocy, which I've been paying a lot more attention to because, look, I don't know about you guys, but me, I've always found the UFO idea silly but intriguing. When I was a boy, a young boy, when I was about 8 years old, I wrote a magazine. You know, I was the writer and editor of a little magazine about UFOs. You know, I was 8 years old, it was just, I was going to do this magazine, and I wrote this little, thing. I wrote it myself, and put some pictures and cutouts and whatnot for this little magazine. And I have very fond memories of that little 8-year-old boy that I used to be. Anyway, the point, I loved UFOs. I thought that was the coolest fucking thing. The aliens and all kinds of shit, right? I love science fiction and, I was a big fan of Ultraman and Ultra 7. These are Japanese science fiction TV shows. I loved all that crap. But, as I grew a little bit, I just got a little bit older, I found it silly, okay? I found it just ridiculous. I find UFOs still intriguing, but silly because there are no UFOs. Or let me rephrase that. See, is there extraterrestrial life? Probably. Is there extraterrestrial life that is intelligent? Probably. Is there extraterrestrial life that is intelligent that has tried to contact us? Possibly. Has intelligent extraterrestrial life been able to come to Earth? Likely not. Why? Because we would know by now. Because it wouldn't be like a little random appearances here and there among people on the fucking farms getting anally probed or some shit like that. No, I mean, if UFOs were for real, like, little green men from Mars or wherever the fuck, or little green men from Alpha Centauri, where would they go? They'd go to one of the urban centers, which are easy to spot. They're not fucking small now, are they? Tokyo, Paris, London. And where would they land? They'd right smack in the middle of the fucking place, and they say, hey, here we are. That's what they'd do, okay? It hasn't happened yet. Ergo, these flying saucers, they're not from another planet. There is the possibility, far-fetched as it may be, that they're time travelers. That would make a hell of a lot more sense. Human beings from the future, perhaps beings from the far future that are not even properly human, that might be some other species altogether. I'm talking, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years from now, who figured out time travel and have come back. And why do they appear in isolated places? To make sure that they don't fuck up the timeline, basically. Yeah, and think about it. That would make a hell of a lot of sense. You're from today, for instance, okay? The year 2021. And you have a time machine. And you'd want to go back to the different periods of not only human civilization, but say like the dinosaurs. I mean, shit, if I had a time machine, I could go back and see the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. Fucking A, I'd go back. Fucking A, I want to see it, see how it happened, see how it went down. Abso-fucking-lutely. And if I did do that, I'd make sure that I appeared in a place that I knew would not cause any damage to my timeline. You guys ever read the story, The Delicate Sound of Thunder, by Ray Bradbury? It's a famous story about precisely that. About precisely some people who go back into the past and inadvertently fuck up the timeline. Okay, it's a great story. It's a famous story. The Delicate Sound of Thunder. Look it up. It's probably online on an online PDF or some shit like that. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make about this UFO stuff, it's amusing to think about it. But anybody over the age of 8 or at least 12 knows that UFOs just, it's bullshit. Okay, but they are pushing this shit heavy, really fucking heavy. There was this fucking movie I watched on Netflix called The Phenomenon. It had Tony Podesta, of all fucking people, on it, that they were interviewing him. Tony Podesta, the chief of staff during the Obama administration. Tony Podesta, whose brother, what's his name? His name slips my mind, who's a big-time lobbyist, right? Who's got those creepy children's portraits and children's statues in the lobby of his home, in the entrance foyer of his home. That guy, you guys know who I'm talking about. Tony Podesta's brother, his name slips my mind. But like I said, he's a big time lobbyist. He's well known and he's creepy as fuck. And the Podesta brothers, yeah, all kinds of stories go on about them, let alone from the whole Pizzagate shit. You don't have to believe in Pizzagate to know that's all kinds of weirdness. I've heard at least about the Podesta brothers, right? So anyway, he fucking appears in this UFO thing. So it's a plant. It's bullshit. that it's something that they're setting up. And all of a sudden, wouldn't you know it, a couple of days ago, they're saying that the UFOs might actually be advanced Russian or Chinese weapons. Let that fucking sink in. Now, everybody knows, as I've said repeatedly, and the people in the American government know this for a fact, that the Chinese and the Russians are buddy buddies. Their relationship has never been better. They are each other's allies in everything but name, and they're making it. They are making clearly the conscious decision not to announce their alliance, so as not to raise anybody's hackles. But they are allied. And all of a sudden, this UFO shit that has been primed over the last 18 months, all of a sudden, oh yeah, it's probably Russian and Chinese super weapons. That plus the COVID virus origins probably coming from China. Plus Tony Fauci getting defenestrated and all of his emails saying that it's all about China and how he was funding gain of research stuff over at the Wuhan virology lab. It all points to people lining up for a war with China. I did a video about this a few days ago. But you see how it's working. It's like multiple bits of information popping up in different places that all comes together for a unified message. You see? Think of the April offensive against Russia. See? What happened in Russia? Well, you had the whole Navalny thing. You had the troops, the Ukrainian troops in the eastern border of Ukraine, i.e. right in front of Russia. You had all these sanctions against various Russian officials that were close to Putin. All this, you had the Color Revolution going on in Belarus, and Belarus is close to the Russians, right? All of a sudden in April, all of these different things like came to a head almost simultaneously. It was like all of these different events that had been started much earlier, sometimes a lot earlier, and sometimes relatively recently. Like, for instance, the color revolutions going on in Belarus had started way back in September of 20, whereas the essential declaration of war, which is what the Declaration of Principles of late February of 2021 was by the Ukrainians, basically saying that they had to retake Crimea by any means necessary, i.e., let's have a war with Russia. That happened in late February, as I said. But it all came to a head in April. It was all these different things happening, started at different times, but it all came up to a head in April. You see how it's happening. You see how different strands, and clearly laid by different players, they all come to a head almost simultaneously. Now, the way I put it that way, and you say to yourself, man, that sounds like fucking conspiracy theory. But if you think of it as different factions pursuing different goals and realizing that the different factions pursuing different goals can all be allied into one goal, then it makes a hell of a lot more sense. You look at the Chinese situation, i.e. the defenestration of Anthony Fauci, the COVID virus origins, and this UFO idiocy, right? And you're like, yeah, it looks like everybody's gearing up for a war. And it's different factions within the power structure, in this case in Washington, that are all aligning to push for war because it's to the benefit of all of them. See? It's to the benefit, like, as I mentioned before, insofar as the White House, of those four factions, it's to the benefit of the Biden administration to go to war with China because that way they can cloud up and obfuscate any kind of accusation by the Chinese that the Biden family is corrupt, which they are. For the Obama administration, right, it allows them to push more of their policies because they're going to be in a war footing. And by way of a war with China, they're able to get the things that they want. What they basically want is control over the people. That's what the Obama administration people really want. Now, insofar as the neocons are concerned, the warmongers, they want more wars so they can make more money because all of them are allied to the weapons manufacturers in the United States. I mean, hell, the current Secretary of Defense used to be an executive at Raytheon, for crying out loud. See, all of that's what's going on there. And insofar as the fourth faction, the far leftists, right, they're in favor of going to war with China because they think that the Chinese, correctly, are a bunch of racists that are out to kill all the Muslims in the Uyghur country. And they are, the hard fact of the matter is that the hard left, they are racists and they don't like the Chinese because they're Chinese. You do keep in mind, you got to understand something, that the far leftists, they are projecting. When they say that they're fighting racism, they're fighting the racism in their own hearts because they hate everybody. And they hate Chinese and they want to wipe them out. Okay. And there's also the other fact, of course, which is that a lot of people, especially in the Obama administration, despise the fact that the Chinese economy on a purchasing power parity is bigger than America. And within, at the most 5 years, the Chinese economy on nominal terms will be bigger than the American economy. And that's baked in. There's nothing to be done about it. That's on its way. Okay. And so for these various reasons, these various factions are all in favor of a war. So all of a sudden, they're making different moves so as to align all together for a war. See, that's what happens when you have these various factions. When they are without any common direction, they start fighting among each other. And since they all know one another, they become very vulnerable to one another. But if they find an external enemy to light upon, then they can all align and go after that external enemy and not hurt one another. They tried to do this in April with the April offensive against Russia. It failed because the Russians outplayed them. Now it seems to me that they are lining up to do the same thing with China. You see, you don't see this unless you're trying to read the tea leaves, trying to understand what these little hints here and there really mean. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and here comes to the next part. You have to understand that if you analyze things this way, you cannot fall for the trap of conspiracy theories. There are some people who say that it's all George Soros. George Soros is out to do it all, No. If you think that George Soros is the Antichrist evil responsible for everything, okay, that's a conspiracy theory. But if you look at George Soros as the head of one faction, then it makes more sense. George Soros is more well known. But there are other people, other groups, other factions. And these other factions are happy to have the spotlight fall on Soros. Because, of course, when that happens, there's a lot more scrutiny to what Soros is doing by the crazies. And the crazies, the conspiracy theories, talk endlessly about him. And it doesn't gain a hell of a lot of traction, but it gains enough traction. Enough people are aware of him. Whereas the other factions, they stay in the shadow because they don't have a lightning rod like George Soros is, see? And there are lots of groups like that. Like BlackRock, for years, BlackRock was another faction, a very powerful faction in the financial sector. BlackRock is a very large hedge fund, and they were able to operate for the longest time in the shadows. Only recently have people started to realize, that is, mainstream people, that is, and conspiracy theorists, right? And they're putting more of a spotlight on BlackRock. Witness recently how all of a sudden people started noticing BlackRock is buying up housing left, right, and center and paying, a hell of a lot more money, anywhere between 10 and 50% above market rate for properties, because they are buying up properties left and right, because what they're doing is getting rid of their dollar assets. They don't want to have any dollars. They want to convert all of their dollars into tangible assets. And a lot of people are thinking that this is what BlackRock is doing is the Great Reset and shit like that. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that BlackRock realizes that the dollar is going to crater. And so they want to get rid of their dollar assets, their treasury bonds, their dollar holdings, and convert those dollar holdings into tangible assets. And since the precious metals market is so small and commodities are consumable, and so you wind up having money, dollars, once again, the smart thing is to get into properties. You don't want to get into commercial property because due to COVID and the work from home, everybody in the real estate market realizes that office space Retail space, it's dead in the water. It's never going to recover. But home ownership, that's the future. That's an asset that will retain its value. And so BlackRock is making its moves. But you see what happens, the difference between conspiracy theory and reading the tea leaves. A conspiracy theorist would say BlackRock is buying properties in order to control where you live, in order to have you be a slave, right? That's the conspiracy theory. But if you're a little more sophisticated, you realize it has nothing to do with the stupid, World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and be happy shit, but rather it has everything to do with wanting to get rid of dollar assets. When you look at it from that lens, when you start thinking of the motivation of the players, of the different factions, then it makes more sense. Because think of it, you're BlackRock, right? Do you really give a shit about controlling people? No, that's not your motivation. Your motivation is to make money, or at least not lose money, right? That's your motivation. Controlling other people, it's irrelevant. Who gives a fuck? You control people or not, you don't care. What you care about is owning assets that will not go down in value, because that, after all, is what a hedge fund is. It holds assets that generate value, that generate an income. And if you think that the dollar is going to crater, then you realize that treasury bonds and agency bonds will all go down the tubes. Mortgage bonds will also go down the tubes because the currency is going to inflate. So basically, any financial instrument that you hold is going to become worthless. Ergo, you want to get out of a financial instrument, be it a bond or be it cash, and you want to get into a tangible asset that its income can be readjusted for inflation. And that happens to be true insofar as property. When you rent out a property, you can easily put a clause in the contract that if there's inflation, it gets readjusted. Or what you do is you say, okay, we'll put out a rental contract for a year, and in a year's time we renegotiate. And if, of course, the inflation is sky high in a year, you say, well, I was charging you $1,000 a month for rent, but now because of inflation, I'm going to charge you, $1,200 or $1,300 or $1,500 or however much the inflation was, right? If it was very high inflation, like say 60% last year, fine, I'll charge you $1,600 instead of $1,000. You see how easy it is if you own a tangible asset, but you can't do that if you own a bond. A bond is only good in a low inflation environment, in a deflationary environment. That's why people, BlackRock, they're exiting their bond positions. See? And if you look at it from the motivation of the players, then it makes sense. That's the difference between conspiracy theories and reading the tea leaves. Conspiracy theories want to ascribe some moral motivation to the actions, a negative moral motivation. These evil bastards want to hurt us. That's a conspiracy theory. Reading the tea leaves is, what is the motivation of this guy? Why would he do this? And then working backwards from that. You see the difference? It's very important that you understand the difference. Because if you don't understand the difference, you're going to fall for the trap of conspiracy theories. What is the trap of conspiracy theories? That you sound like a fucking idiot. That's the trap, okay? You sound like a fucking idiot, and more to the point, you don't predict the future. Because you got to understand, what is the point of science? Ask yourself, what is the point of science? What is the point of the sciences in general? What's the point of analysis in general? To predict the future. That's the whole point of it. See? Okay, you do some experiment, right? And consistently you get the same result. And from this experiment, you apply it. For example, you suppose this is like the 1800s, and you do an experiment where you have refined gasoline, say, and you burn it. And you burn it, and you measure somehow exactly how much force is expelled by burning the gasoline. And then you say, if this happens all the time, every time I burn X quantity of gasoline, I get this amount of force, then if I build a cylinder and burn this gasoline in that cylinder, it'll shove down a piston that'll drive a crankshaft, and I can get some mechanical energy out of it, right? And lo and behold, you build a cylinder with a piston and a crankshaft, and you burn that gasoline just like you did in the experiment. And because in science, the whole point is to be able to replicate the experiment over and over and over again, you replicate it in these new controlled circumstances, i.e. the gasoline inside the cylinder. It pushes the piston, which drives the crankshaft, and you have mechanical energy. Voila, you predicted the future. You see? That's the whole point of science. It's to, when you take a drug, you go to the doctor, and you have a certain malady, whatever the malady, your tummy aches, right? And your doctor says, well, it's probably because you ate this food. Do you eat this food? And you're like, yeah, I ate that food. Okay, take this pill. And you say, why this pill? And the doctor says, well, we've tried it so many times with so many other patients who've had tummy aches because they eat the same fucking thing, that odds are 99% that you take this pill and the tummy ache will go away, because it's happened all these other times with these other people. You take the pill and lo and behold, no more tummy ache. You see? See, that's science. It's predicting the future. When you do analysis, political analysis, economic analysis, you're trying to figure out the future. And so when you go into conspiracy theories, what happens is that you're not predicting the future. You're blinding yourself. You're giving yourself a nefarious explanation for things that have happened, but you're not creating a runway that allows you to see into the future. You see the difference? It's very important that you understand this difference. It's very important that when you read tea leaves, you are dispassionate and be willing to accept some other explanation. You'll notice that in this discussion, I point out that something happened with Bill Gates, but I haven't drawn it into China or anything else. I don't know what it means. It's a tea leaf that's sort of like, for now, independent, because it's certainly not connected to China. But what is it connected to? Because it's clear that there's been this 180 on Bill Gates, and all of a sudden he's gone from the scene. What's going on there? Nobody knows, and right now there isn't enough information. It could be that more information will arise. And I'll tell you right now, I have a pet theory that's in its infancy. I suspect that the negative effects of the vaccine will be blamed on him. And somehow he will be tied to that. Somehow. I don't know how yet. But I think that that's kind of it. And this is a hypothesis. This is just an idea at this point. Okay? You got to keep in mind. You got to keep in mind that it could be that you have a certain theory and then it turns out not to be true. Okay? Now, all of this, I'm realizing as I'm speaking to you, and I'm going to add this like an extra point that's not on the outline. I'm realizing that what I'm discussing with you is something that you should look up, and it's called abductive inference. I'm going to write it in the chat so you guys can see the spelling, and I'd appreciate you checking it out. I'm doing it in all caps so that you spot it really easy. Abductive inference. I just posted it. Now, what is abductive inference? Well, the American philosopher C.S. Peirce is recognized as the father of logic, of formal logic. And he identified several different kinds of inference, principally three. There were others, by the way, but there were principally three. There was deductive inference, there was inductive inference, and there was abductive inference. Now, C.S. Peirce, I'll write his name as well in the chat. C.S. Peirce. Notice, it looks as if I misspelled the word Pierce. It's not P-I-E-R-C-E, but rather P-E-I-R-C-E, and it's pronounced Peirce. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. But anyway, C.S. Peirce, like I said, is the father of formal logic. He was an American pragmatist in the philosophy school of pragmatism. William James was also one of them. And the point with C.S. Peirce is that he identified these three forms of inference: deductive inference, inductive inference, abductive inference. Now, what are each of these? Deductive inference is that the conclusion follows from the premises and is contained by the premises. For instance, all men are mortal. Socrates was a man, ergo Socrates was mortal. See? In the conclusion, Socrates was mortal. There is no element that was not included in the premises. They are all included in the premises. Mhm. Now, what is an inductive inference? An inductive inference is an inference that arises from the premises. For example, tomorrow there's going to be a sunrise in the morning. Okay. And why do I know this? Because it's happened every single time for the past billions of years. Okay. And ergo, tomorrow morning there'll be a sunrise. That's an inductive inference. Often people call an inductive inference, they call it an inference from experience. It's an inference that you see because you've seen it so many times before. You might not understand the reasons why it is happening, but it has happened so many times before that it is reasonable to expect it to happen tomorrow. You see? An example, before people understood gravity, right? Nobody would jump out of a 50-foot cliff. Nobody would do it because they didn't understand gravity, but they had seen that anybody who jumped off a 50-foot cliff would land on the ground and die. Yeah, it had happened so many times that they didn't have to test it. They didn't understand why it was happening, but they saw that it happened, and so they weren't going to jump off a 50-foot ledge. Now we understand gravity, what's actually going on, that two masses attract one another, and in fact the earth is attracting your body just as your body is attracting the earth, and actually moving the earth ever so slightly, but it's really the earth that's pulling you to it, and of course you go smack and die, and that's that. Right now we understand it, but see, for millions of years, human beings and their prehistoric ancestors and their Australopithecus or whatever the fuck, they didn't, allow themselves to fall off a cliff because they knew what would happen. They didn't understand gravity, but they knew about falling. See, that's an inductive inference. Okay. An abductive inference is very interesting. An abductive inference is basically an educated guess. That's what it is. And that's what I'm talking about here in this presentation. An educated guess. You see, when you have enough experience, you can guess more or less what's going on. You don't have every single strand of the situation, but you have a fair idea of what happened. An example, a simple example. You live at home with your puppy. Your puppy, little Rex, a great little puppy, right? And you come home, and the whole apartment is like a fucking ruin. Like everything is thrown around and destroyed and whatnot, right? And you see the damage to your apartment, and it's tremendous. Things ripped up, cushions ripped up, and your puppy, your little Rex, is just sitting there wagging his tail, but very nervous because he's a little puppy, right? And the damage is tremendous. It's not just that the cushions were ripped up, or it's just the whole place has been turned topsy-turvy. And what do? You look at little Rex, and you realize instantly Rex didn't do it. Yeah, the damage is too great. It's very obvious. And you say to yourself, I bet it was a thief, maybe even a junkie, who broke into the house and tried to steal my shit. And poor little Rex was here all alone. He must have been scared shitless. So what do? Do you yell at Rex for not guarding your home? Do you yell at Rex for causing a mess? No, because you know he didn't cause a mess, and you know he must have been scared shitless. So you take little Rex and you take him in your arms. And, poor little puppy, it's okay. It's no big deal. Did the bad man scare you? You have no idea what happened, but you have a fairly decent guess. You assume that, yeah, maybe some junkie broke into my apartment looking for something to steal, didn't find anything, just ripped up everything looking for something, and probably in his frustration did, some damage to my apartment just because he was pissed off he didn't find any money or anything he could sell, right? That's the guess you'll make. You'll know that the dog didn't do it because the damage is too great for a little puppy to have done such damage. And you'll know that the puppy probably had to run away from the fucking thief or whoever the fuck ruined your apartment. And you look at all the damage and you say to yourself, no, this isn't damage of like a thief. A thief probably wouldn't even have made so much damage like a professional thief. He would have tried to have been as inconspicuous as possible. No, it's probably some junkie, right? Or suppose in this hypothetical, you have a vindictive ex-girlfriend. And you're like, oh yeah, probably the ex somehow, maybe she had a key or whatnot, and she broke in and fucked up my place. You see, you don't know. And there's no clue that will tell you if it was a junkie or if it was a vindictive ex-girlfriend. You guess. But more likely than not, your guess is accurate. See? That's the point of abductive inferences. You often as not guess correctly. Not all the time. Because it could be that you think, oh, this vindictive cunt ruined my apartment. You know, she was so pissed off, right? But then it turns out that your ex-girlfriend was like, I don't know, in some other city 1,000 miles away. It couldn't have been her, right? And so then you're reduced to, oh yeah, it must have been a junkie. I wonder which junkie, right? And then you find out that maybe a block away, there's like a rehab center or some shit like that. And you see what I'm saying? An abductive inference is an educated guess that more often than not is accurate, but not always. And you always have to be guarding against it. You have to, not guard against it, rather, you have to be rethinking and rehashing what you think you know. I love abductive inferences. I think about that. I use them all the time in what I'm analyzing because it's such a useful way of reasoning. In fact, it's a necessary way of reasoning because all scientific hypotheses start with an abductive inference. You start by positing something that, looking at the available facts, this seems like a reasonable guess. And from that reasonable guess, you develop a hypothesis. And from the hypothesis, well, you go out and you test it by creating experiments. And you do the experiments that either prove the hypothesis or negate the hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And see, that's why abductive inference is the basis of science. Or let me phrase that, not the basis of science, but rather the basis of scientific reasoning. What I'm proposing here in this webinar is for you to start paying attention and making more abductive inferences about what's going on. Now, what's key about an abductive inference, about reading the tea leaves, is that you actually have to be informed. And that's another issue with conspiracy theorists. A lot of them are just fucking ill-informed. Like, for example, when the conspiracy theorists talk about BlackRock is trying to take over the world and make you be a slave or a peon in some neo-feudalist society, they're missing the point. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand the motivation. Or let me phrase that. They're not examining the motivation of BlackRock. BlackRock doesn't give a shit about people. No, nobody does. I mean, we're too busy with our own lives to be worried about controlling somebody else's life, okay? We got people close to us that we're trying to control, and we barely manage to do that, okay? I'm talking parents trying to manage children, for instance, which is perfectly reasonable and legitimate, that they're trying to control the children's behavior, and they're having a hell of a hard time doing it, right? You think that some corporation is going to be trying to enslave the whole world? No, they just want to make money. They just want to make money, and so they can get their big bonuses. That's their motivation. And so when you think of it in those terms, i.e., when you educate yourself about a situation and don't just go half-assed spouting a conspiracy theory, you're able to make inferences that make sense and might be able to help you predict the future. Now, I'm going to be releasing a video on Wednesday called I'm Going All In on the Euro. Okay, it basically explains why I've decided that the euro is the future. And the euro as a currency is the one that I'm going to be backing into the future because I think that the dollar is toast and you know, it's over for the dollar. Okay, it's just a matter of time at this point. The fact that an organization like BlackRock, for instance, a huge hedge fund like that, is exiting its dollar positions and going into property, that's like a fucking sign, see? And see, the point that you have to do is that you have to be setting up your hypotheses about a situation, but always be open to new information. Remember when I told you guys that the end of the world was here with the COVID-19 vaccine, right? At the time, I thought so. I seriously did. And then what happened? I got new information, more information. And it proved that the virus that causes COVID-19 is not that serious. And it could very well be, though it remains to be proven, it could be that the Chinese, with all that social media and those videos, you remember those videos of people like fucking like having seizures, right? Out in fucking public and dead bodies all over the fucking place, right? It could be that that was just bullshit. I mean, basically some sort of like psyop on the part of the Chinese. Who knows? We'll never know. Okay? We'll never know. Those videos existed and we all saw them, but now they're conveniently gone, right? The origins of those videos, who knows? But the point is, when you get new information, you have to change your mind. And you cannot be married to any idea. And conspiracy theorists are married to their conspiracy. They can't explain a situation by other means, okay? They can't, and they won't allow another explanation. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I'll mention it to you guys because you guys are my hardcore audience, right? And it doesn't really matter. I don't want to get into the morass of the Kennedy assassination, right? But you all know the story about the Kennedy assassination. There are basically two camps: that it was a big conspiracy, or that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. And what happened was, not too long ago, I was in touch with somebody on unrelated matter. I mean, totally unrelated. And this guy, we got to be pretty good friends. And this guy was in a position to know. Okay, he wasn't like intelligence or anything like that, but he was in a position to know, and I'll leave it at that. But he knew. I mean, and I know that he knew. Okay, I mean, there's no doubt. Okay, and you'll just have to take my word for it. Okay, because at this point, as I tell you this is third hand. I'm not giving any names or anything like that, but you'll just have to take my word, and that's that. But anyway, this guy told me as a fact, as a known and absolute fact, that there was indeed a conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy, and that it did involve the Dulles brothers, Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles. It did involve Lyndon Johnson. It did not involve Richard Nixon, who happened to be in Dallas when Kennedy was assassinated. And it did involve the mafia, and it did involve a whole bunch of other anti-communists, okay? Involved in the CIA and whatnot, all kinds of people. And they were all planning to assassinate John Kennedy. And it was in the works. And what happened was that Lee Harvey Oswald beat them to it. Simple as that. Lee Harvey Oswald was exactly what he seemed to be. Some loser, lost guy, leftist, who had gone to Russia, Soviet Union. He'd gone to Minsk and then come back to the United States with his wife and whatnot. A total loser, and he got lucky. Simple as that. I mean, and it sounds insane, but this guy said that that's what happened. Okay, and the reason that the Warren Commission seemed so suspicious was that they were trying to cover up the fact that there had actually been a conspiracy, but the conspirators had not successfully assassinated Kennedy, because they had been planning to assassinate him much later, closer to the Democratic Convention. They wanted to assassinate him just before the Democratic Convention in 1964 and usher in Lyndon Johnson as the nominee and eventual president. And the mafia's task was to kill the assassin. Okay? That's why they sent Jack Ruby, because when Lee Harvey Oswald killed the guy, they were caught flat-footed. The mob was caught flat-footed, and they assumed, oh, the conspiracy's on, and then they did it, so we have to get rid of the assassin. And so that's why Jack Ruby was dispatched, on a moment's notice to go and kill Lee Harvey Oswald, because the mob thought that they were doing their part in the conspiracy. But they weren't supposed to kill Lee Harvey Oswald, because Lee Harvey Oswald was not part of the conspiracy. He really did act alone, okay? And what happens is that, see, when you know all the information, then you realize, oh yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And all of a sudden, everything becomes real fucking clear. See? That's an abductive inference. An abductive inference makes things clear. Okay? And it has to be adjusted with new information. What's going on today, because of the failure of accountability and the opaqueness of the power centers and the concentration of power and the factionalism that has occurred in those concentrations of power, you have to be paying attention to the news. And that's the lesson of this webinar. You have to be figuring out what's going on, and you have to make sure that you don't fall for the trap of conspiracy thinking. Conspiracy thinking will take you down a rabbit hole because you will not be able to predict the future. And in these very uncertain times, what you want above all else is to be able to predict the future, to be able to figure out, if this is going on, then likely this next thing is going to happen. My thinking with this BlackRock thing, for instance, is that if these fuckers are exiting all dollar assets, inflation is definitely on. I mean, like hyperinflation is definitely on, because they wouldn't do it otherwise. Because if they're making good, solid money from their dollar investments, why would they exit them? They're not exiting their dollar positions because they want to enslave the world. No, they're exiting their dollar positions because they want to make more fucking money, or at least not lose money by way of inflation. See? And so that's why they're doing this. And so if you look at the motivation and you're always flexible and always willing to change your mind and never married to a narrative, but simply trying to figure out things and willing to drop an idea at a moment's notice, then you're on your way, because ultimately you want to figure out what's going to happen next. Yeah. And God knows what's going to happen next. Anyway, I've been yapping on for, almost 90 minutes now. So let's, let me put out the link for you all to hop on and we'll talk. And we're going to go on for, at least until the end of the hour, because I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to think. And I got to emphasize this. I just put it up, by the way. I have to emphasize this. Don't fall for the fucking trap of the conspiracy theories, because there's also something else I've noticed. A lot of people, especially in the mainstream media, are just eager to label anybody who's a dissident a conspiracy theorist. And so you don't want to put yourself in that position, because it's not only that you'll be disqualified, it's that it'll hurt you. Okay? So you don't want to hurt yourself. What you want to do is figure out the future. Okay? That's your goal. Your goal is not to raise your profile and have everybody attack you. Your goal is to understand what's coming, figure out the future. Anyway, Carlos, how's it going? Let me put you on. Carlos, you there?
How's it going, Coach?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Pretty good. Yeah. So my question is pretty simple. So you've talked a lot about like the Kennedy assassination, and like the conspiracy and everything. My question is, so what was the motivation for all these people wanting to murder Kennedy?
They had different motivations. See, like on the one hand, the mobsters, they wanted to shut down any investigation of the mob, and Bobby Kennedy was all about the mob because he wanted the easy headline. Okay, J. Edgar Hoover, for instance, was part of it because he wanted to continue to have his bureaucratic power. Lyndon Johnson wanted to be president. He hated the fact that he was VP, and he hated the fact that he had stepped down from the obvious and great power he had as the majority leader in the Senate. See, factions have different motivations, and that's why the Kennedy assassination is really interesting. These different groups, these different factions, they were all conspiring to kill this guy. It wasn't even personal. They each had a pressing desire that they wanted to advance. And so they just so happened that they all aligned. That's how you have to look at factions. That when they are all acting in concert, it's not that they all necessarily agree. It's that all think that pursuing the same goal will get each of them to achieve their objective. You see? Like the reverse example, when the Biden administration offered this summit with Putin, but on the other hand, on the very next day, issued these sanctions against Putin's cronies. Those are obviously two different factions. One faction wanted to simmer down and tone down the whole problem with Putin so as to set it off the table, and the other wanted to attack Putin, bringing the subject back up in interest, right? And so you see how the factions, when they have different motivations, they can act at cross purposes. But when they all have the same motivation, or let me phrase that, when they are all going in the same direction, it's that their objectives happen to align or happen to not be at cross purposes. You see what I'm saying? You have to think of it in those terms.
Mhm.
Anything else on your mind?
Interesting. And like the other question was like not now going into like the whole Kennedy thing. What would have happened if the assassination failed?
Who knows?
Especially with the Bay of Pigs.
Who knows? No, I mean you mean in terms of Vietnam? Bay of Pigs had already happened. No, like Vietnam probably would have happened anyway. Probably more or less the same way it happened. Okay,
Mhm.
I don't believe Oliver Stone's thing, but see that kind of counterfactual. It's interesting to think about it, right? But look, counterfactual history is very interesting to think about because it leads you to understand the weight of a specific event or of a specific person.
Mhm.
For instance, I once read this book called Why If that had a number of counterfactual histories, and one of them um, posited what would have happened if Alexander the Great had been killed in some battle. Because in some battle he was in, I'm not that familiar with the history, but in some battle he was almost killed, but one of his bodyguards literally threw himself in front of his sword and died protecting Alexander, right? And Alexander obviously survived and continued on conquering and whatnot. And the counterfactual was, well, what would have happened if this bodyguard had hesitated or not jumped in front of him or what, in front of the sword or whatnot? Alexander would have died. And this historian eventually said, well, we would probably be Zoroastrian or worshiping the god Mazda. I forget which religion it is, Zoroastrianism or some other religion. Doesn't matter. Okay. But the point is that he came to that conclusion. And it was really interesting as a thought experiment. I read this book 20 years ago. Okay, so as I'm speaking to you now, I'm realizing I don't remember the details, but the details aren't that important. The important thing is that it leads you to think of the importance of given situation. Now, insofar as Kennedy not dying or dying, who knows? And it's pointless because he did die. Okay, it's fun as a parlor amusement, but in terms of like for paying attention to the future, it's useless. And I'm all about the future. I don't really care about the past or what might have been. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Anything else on your mind?
Well, now talking about the future. So when you mentioned about China, I currently live in the U.S. What do you think the implications are for an individual person in the U.S. With the whole China war thing?
Well, I think that there's going to be clearly some serious inflation, and working people are going to be hurt the worst. I think that a war with China, I think it would be catastrophic because all of a sudden, all the goods that are being produced in China would not reach American shores. All kinds of goods, iPhones and cars, and well, it's not just the cars because a lot of cars are made in Mexico, for instance, but parts of them are made in China, essential parts. I mean, we're having this whole problem because of a semiconductor shortage in Taiwan because they wound down the factories in Taiwan because of COVID. And now that the economy is starting back up again, they need these semiconductor chips, basic ones, not like really highly sophisticated ones, but there aren't enough of them to go around. And so there's a supply chain interruption or slowdowns, and so that drives up prices for consumer goods. If there's a war with China, everything that's produced in China will not reach America. And that includes essential components to all sorts of stuff. I mean, refrigerators, phones, everything. It would be a fucking disaster. Yeah. And it would crash the American economy.
Yeah. No, and just one word on that also.
Sure.
Inflation is real. I work in big tech. My salary hasn't really changed much since January, but I do consultations on the side, and my salary has almost two to 3x since January.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about your expenses?
Expenses, I don't really spend much, but yeah, I can see like gas, for example, is at $5. Grocery stores are super expensive. Yeah, so it's crazy.
Notice restaurants. Do you go to a lot to restaurants?
Not much. But yeah, like I've noticed like
How do you eat?
slight increase. I just cook at home.
Okay, well then start paying more attention to food both at the supermarket and at restaurants.
Yeah.
Because as prices rise for foods, you're gonna see them, and they're saying that there's gonna be a drought. That there is a drought going on now, as a matter of fact. So, a drought in the U.S. that will affect food supplies. So we're gonna see more of that. So yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that their white collar jobs, they're getting paid a lot more money all of a sudden. Yeah,
Yeah. I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, Carlos, great talking to you, man. Take it easy.
Awesome. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Bye-bye. Chris O, how's it going?
It's going well, Coach. Thanks for the Saturday webinar.
No problem.
2 questions. What do you see in the leaves regarding COVID in terms of lockdowns, vaccines, fourth wave, jab?
COVID is over, and they're trying to just figure out a way to unwind the position. Yeah, it's over. Yeah, because also it's too obvious that Texas and Florida and the other states that are totally open, they're doing fine. So they're trying to unwind the situation as quickly as possible.
But they're still, talking about the fourth wave, the new vector, the necessity of passports when traveling, quarantining.
Yeah, that passport thing, I don't think it's going to fly. Because I think that too many states are just like, fuck that shit. Okay. And but we'll see. We'll have to see. Okay. But the COVID thing is over. It's over. Okay. Just people are just like, fuck that noise. Because I got sick of it. And what happened was that the different people pushing it have been so discredited. Yeah, it's over. And lockdowns, yeah, there are going to be lockdowns in some places here and there. I mean, fuck what's going on in Canada, man. Fucking incredible. In Manitoba, that they arrested, what's his face, a couple of days ago. The head of the opposition, they got arrested in Manitoba for violating lockdown and quarantine shit. Man, that is like totalitarian state shit, But anyway, I think that by the end of the year, it's going to be all over everywhere. Everybody's going to be like, okay, it's over, it's done. Because people are realizing that political leadership is realizing that they want to shut this down. They want to get it. They want to be done with it. Okay, because it's hurting them more than it's helping them. Okay.
Well, the thing is, I am in Canada, and I don't see that anytime in the future. They're doubling down.
I know. In Canada, what'll probably happen is that all of a sudden, and it'll be like ferocious, the tide will turn. Because of what's going on in America. So many places in America that it's so obvious that this shit is over, right? Also in the UK, same thing. What will happen is that there's going to be a snapback kind of reaction. All of a sudden, everybody's just going to be just fuck off with this shit already. And it'll be sudden. And a lot of people are going to lose their heads over it in the sense of they're going to pay a huge price. They're going to lose their careers. The guys who are pushing lockdown the most near the end, near the snapback, those are the guys who are going to be crucified. Okay. Because people are just sick of it. I mean, you tell me, you're in Canada, right? And you're talking to other people in Canada. What's their mood?
I mean, people are sick of it, and they're starting to see through it. There's no disguise. The mainstream media is definitely using lies and omission. They're jumping on any story that pops up. There's a major story in Canada right now regarding some quote-unquote terrorist act because some guy ran over a family, and they're just using any possibility to turn their attention to some other news from the main news. At the same time, it is the Canadian tradition not to take accountability. I mean, people will retire, but I don't see anybody, any heads rolling here. It's just the culture isn't about accountability.
Well, maybe there won't be any heads roll, but it will snap back, and it'll be sudden. It'll be sudden and decisive, and it's just going to be like enough, and there's going to be a collective enough moment, and that's that. It'll be over.
I mean, by that time, the amount of people that will be vaccinated and then economic destruction, I mean, that's already done.
Well, look, my thinking is at this point, and I've often been wrong, and I could be very wrong about this, but my thinking is that late this year, early next year, when people start realizing that there are a lot fewer pregnancies, that's when shit is really going to hit the fan. Okay? because my thinking is that probably this vaccine, if it doesn't render people outright sterile, it affects them in such a way that it becomes extremely difficult for them to have children or to get pregnant, okay? Or at least carry a child to term. I think it will affect fertility in a big way. And once the data starts really accumulating because see, right now we're 4 months into this vaccine regime.
Yeah.
So people trying to get pregnant, they're trying, but in the first few months, it's not like a big deal, right? But we have seen a lot of stories of women who were pregnant, took the vaccine, and they lost their kid in like 2 days, right? We're also seeing a lot of very troubling reports that young people, children under the age of 15, who have been taking this vaccine have serious cardiac problems that adults do not have when they take the vaccine. And likely it's because of this vaccine doing something to children, okay? And the fact that they're freaking out about it probably means that there are a lot more reports than we're finding out, okay? And again, this is more like tea leaf reading that we have to do. And this is so despicable because the Western democracies used to be open societies where you would know accurate information. But now that they are censoring information, deplatforming people who speak out and say true things, massaging and managing the information output, you don't know what's going on. But my thinking is that the vaccine, we haven't heard the last of the vaccine. But insofar as the lockdowns, I think that by the end of the year, worldwide, it'll be done. Because we're sick of it.
It's encouraging to hear that this might be over soon, but again, I'm very skeptical about any accountability, especially in a culture where people just say, sorry, too bad, move on.
I'm afraid you're right.
A second question, it pertains as well to last week's seminar. Is there a clause in international law regarding a war regarding a debtor and a creditor? What happens to debt and obligations with these two parties?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
Let's say China and US go to war. What happens to their financial obligations?
They go out the window, I suppose. I really don't know.
I'm just
in different circumstances. Because ultimately, a bond is an obligation between the state and the person holding the bond, the person, the individual, or company, a bank, as it were. So I would guess that they're still liable for it.
But in case of the Chinese government owning treasury bonds too.
Yeah. But of course, if the currency has been devalued and because of inflation, and then the debt becomes worthless. Okay. And also it could be that, I'm just thinking out loud here. It could be that, for instance, the Treasury Department says that it will not honor any debt issued to the Chinese government, but then the Chinese government could just sell the debt on the secondary market and it becomes somebody else's problem. And that somebody else would say, hey, I'm not the Chinese government. I'm some random guy who picked up these bonds. So give me my money, So I don't know. I honestly don't know, But my thinking is that, in my own case, I've exited all of my dollar assets, bonds and everything. I'm just totally out of the dollar because it's just not worth it. I decided years ago that I wanted to be rich enough not to worry, but not so rich that I did worry. Okay. I wanted to just have a nice life, materially speaking. And I've seen guys who are, billionaires and their lives are miserable. Okay. They don't know who to trust. They have a miserable life. They're always worried about their fucking money. It's like a full-time job just managing their fucking money. And they're always worried. I don't need that life, right? I started worrying about my money with this dollar situation as of late. And now that I exited my dollar positions, I'm relaxed. I don't have to worry. And that's the kind of life I want to lead, and that's me. I just don't want to worry. And holding on to the dollar in this set of circumstances, while the insanity of the Biden administration and the Federal Reserve, fuck that. I don't need that worry, but that's me.
Thanks a lot, Coach. I wish you a pleasant weekend and good luck on your trip.
You too, man. Great. Thanks so much. Take it easy, man.
Bye.
Okay, Alfred, you there?
Hi, Coach.
Hey, what's up, man?
Good. Happy birthday to your daughter.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
Okay, so my question refers to a couple comments that I put in the chat right at the beginning. So basically, I mentioned
by the way, sorry, Alfred. I just want to point out. See, when I'm doing presentations, I don't look at the chat. I can't see them, and often later when I start answering questions, I don't read the chat because I'm paying attention to the question, and so that's why to anybody who's posted stuff in the chat, I didn't see it. And so I'm happy to answer any question or any idea you have. But if it's in the chat, I probably didn't see it unless it's by happenstance. Okay. I just want to point that out. It's not out of just, being mean or something like that. It's just that, I got a lot of like balls in the air when I'm doing these things. And so that's why I can't pay attention to the chat. So anyway, Alfred, you were saying that in the chat early on, you said, what did you say?
So basically, I pointed out that something about conspiracy theories. Basically, I said that conspiracy theories and basically all these phenomena of the fake news come because the people, the general public, mistrust the official news and the mainstream media. And the reason why people swallow these kind of conspiracy theories is because they know at their core that the government don't have their best interest at heart. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree. I would also point out that a lot of times conspiracy theories are floated by the government itself or by people who want to obfuscate the truth. See, I mean, like, think about it. Suppose you are one of the Kennedy assassins. Let's just say for the sake of argument. Then what would you want to do? You'd want to put out as many conspiracy theories as possible so that people would discount any kind of conspiracy and therefore not pay attention and wonder if you were part of the conspiracy. You see what I'm saying? There's a saying, there's not a saying, there's an idea floated around that all this recent UFO shit is just to confuse people, which is highly likely, as a matter of fact, because it doesn't make any sense that all of a sudden all this shit is popped up. It makes a lot more sense to use this bullshit as a way to hide what's going on. Now, a lot of people have said that, that Area 51 stuff, that Area 51 is where they keep all the debris of UFO landings and shit, right? Well, there was somebody who said that, no, Area 51 is where they tested new weapon systems, new aircraft systems. And so putting out this conspiracy theory that it's where they keep the UFOs made people not pay attention to what is actually going on at Area 51. Which seems to me a very compelling thesis, that you put out conspiracy theories as a way to obfuscate what's actually going on. That might be something that you don't want people to know. And so that if it's just shrouded in conspiracy theory bullshit espoused by a bunch of crazy people, then sensible people will say, oh, that's just bullshit, conspiracy, and just ignore it. You see?
I see. Thanks, Coach.
My pleasure. What else is on your mind? Anything?
Not much. I mean, lately it's been hard as a surprise because yesterday I just signed my first purchase for a house.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah.
You signed for your first house? I don't quite understand you. Your mic is a little bit like, it doesn't sound very good, your mic.
Oh, well, yeah, that's what I said. I signed for the purchase of my first house.
Congratulations. Yeah. When are you getting it?
Probably August, because right now it's only a 2-bedroom house and I want to add a third one to rent it out. So
Great.
I'll have to do some, maintenance, some upgrades. And that's, oh wait. Well, that's that.
Yeah. Congratulations, man. Yeah. Tell us about it next time, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Easy.
See you.
Hey, Rahul, how's it going?
Hi, Coach. How you doing? I'm doing well. And happy birthday to your daughter.
Oh, thank you very much. Hang on. Before we go forward, Steve-O says, what evidence does he have that vaccine affects pregnancy? Go on Twitter and Naomi Klein, is it? Had a bunch of stuff about that. And I posted some stuff too on Twitter somewhere. I'll pass it along. But there's a lot of stuff about women who've been vaccinated and lost their babies, especially on Facebook. On Facebook, apparently, there's a lot of that shit going around, even though the Facebook censors are trying to stamp that out. So yeah, check it out. So anyway, Rahul, what's on your mind, man?
Yeah, I just want to say, I've been enjoying videos, and first video I saw was on the blended family, and I really like the fact that you were so honest and like finally someone else talking about the abuse. You hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, they do a lot of abuse. They don't talk about that much now, do they?
No. And you realize when you talk to some of the girls, they're a bit messed up because of it.
Yeah, a lot of girls.
And a lot of the boys have been bullied.
Yeah. Yeah, the boys get bullied and the girls get abused either by the stepfather or by the stepbrothers. Yeah. Yeah, which makes complete sense from an evolutionary perspective. Yeah.
Oh, my question was going to be on, because in the UK, the G7 summit's on.
Yep.
Because, I mean,
right?
cross well, so I just thought I'd like to hear your take on it.
Well, this G7 is a short one. I don't think it means anything. I don't think anything important is going to come out of it. I know that the Biden administration is all hell bent for leather on rolling back Brexit. But from what I understand of British politics, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if Boris Johnson were to make even a little bit of a move to pull back on Brexit, he'd lose his job. He'd be toast. And so he can't. And so the Biden administration even pushing that is absurd, it seems to me. But they want that. They want the Brits. I mean, they're not giving up the ghost on this Brexit situation, which is just dumb, it seems to me.
But how does it benefit him?
What?
How does it benefit Biden if if we reverse Brexit for him or for his?
I don't know. That's a good question, man. It doesn't benefit the United States at all. Or let me phrase it: the United States is indifferent as to whether the UK is a part of Europe or not. And so I don't understand this. I think it's just foolish. But of course, what happened was that before the summit, there were all these noises coming out of Washington that they wanted the UK to bow down to the EU and follow along on the whole fishing thing and the whole Northern Ireland thing, and follow EU guidelines, EU regulations rather. And they sent this formal letter of protest, which is like a big diplomatic thing. But once Biden was actually in the UK, they just walked that all back, and they're buddies. And that again shows that there are different factions in the Biden White House pursuing different aims. And so that's why it's contradictory. That's why you can't count on the Biden White House or the Kamala Harris White House when she becomes president. I frankly, at the pace we're going, I think it'll be soon, within a year or less, but we'll see. Yeah. What's the vibe in the UK about the G7 summit? Hello, Rahul? Hello? I think Rahul is having a little bit of a problem there. Rahul, you there? Oh, I don't know what's going on. Okay, I'll bring in Alec. Alec Chivago, how's it going?
Good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Yeah.
You mentioned moving your money to euros.
Yes.
So I just want to ask a couple quick financial questions. I'll just shoot them all off, and then I'll listen and let you speak.
Okay.
First one is, do you recommend looking into getting into the Forex market in terms of trading money? Is that a good time to start doing something like that, or just go?
I've never been in favor of trading. Okay.
No?
I always lose when I trade. Trade is what? You're buying and selling different assets, expecting to make money off of the difference in price.
Mm-hmm.
And you really got to know what you're doing. And I just am totally against it. I used to day trade back in like the late 90s. It wasn't like a systematic thing. It was sort of like I fell into it. I was like buying and selling shit. And, it was like a big disaster. Okay. I think it's a huge mistake. I think that you shouldn't trade. You should, I personally don't trade. I just invest because like I said before, when you're trading, you're always worried. And I don't want to be worried. I don't want to be concerned about shit. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess you got to have the temperament for it and then be patient to learn how to actually do it. So,
well, yeah, but you got to keep in mind that, it's a high stress thing. Okay. And I personally have chosen that I don't want to live that kind of life. If others want to do it, fine. But I can't give you any kind of intelligent advice about that. Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So just put it.
I mean, insofar as Forex, man, I personally wouldn't do it. See? I remember years ago, like I tried to time the gold market. It was a fucking disaster. I had good ideas, but I tried to time it and hop in, hop out, and try to catch the upswing. And I just kept losing, man. And then finally it's like, fuck it, man. This is just stupid. If I just bought it and held it, I would have made a shit ton of money. But instead I tried timing the market and it was always a fucking mess. I started trying to trade my way to making money instead of just buying it and just like waiting. Okay. And so that's my opinion about trading. I haven't traded since 2009. Okay. Not really. Okay. I mean, I sometimes I bought something and then sold it shortly thereafter, but it wasn't because of a price increment. It was more because of extraneous factors that obliged me, for whatever reasons, to exit a position in short order. But like actually trading, of like trying to deliberately make money off of price differentials, nah, I don't do that. I just don't have the temperament, or don't have the interest. Yeah. And going into Forex, man, people get burned on that shit. They always do, you know? Nobody's got a foolproof way of making money off of that market.
You've traveled the world. You lived all over the place. When you bank, if you don't mind me asking, do you usually bank in the country that you're living in?
Yeah, you always want to have like your living money in the bank that you're in, the country that you're living in, right? The living money, like, you know, the money that you need for groceries, that kind of shit. But your real money, you want it outside the country that you're living in. And you want to make sure that that money is in a safe place, that and that everything is on the up and up and everything is squared away. And so that way, you know, you don't have any problems. And you want to have a clear dividing line between the local money, the money that you have in the place where you live, and your real money. Okay. And you want to make sure that there is no how can I put this? You never want to expose your real money. Okay. You always want to have your real money just safe and sound. Yeah.
The student debt crisis. Do you think that what do you think the situation is going to be with debtors in terms of inflation? Do you think it's going to put them in a better position?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, because if you have a fixed debt, okay, no matter how much it is, but if inflation is eating it away, then it's going to become less. See? I mean, like, okay, so you have, say, for the sake of argument, $1,000 a month in student loan payments. I'm just hypothetical, right? And you know, you're earning $2,000 a month. Oh man, then your student loan is a huge chunk of your money, right? But if because of inflation, your salary rises and rises to $12,000 a month, which is perfectly reasonable in a high inflation regime, then all of a sudden your $1,000 debt isn't that big of a deal. See?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's the beauty of inflation. And that's why if you are really serious thinking that there's going to be a high inflation, you should get into debt in fixed interest rate. Okay, never adjustable, fixed payment. And you get into debt, heavily into debt, and you watch as inflation has its way with your debt, and all of a sudden you owe shitloads less. Yeah, or for all practical purposes, it could be, you know, it could just totally eliminate the debt. You didn't do anything. See?
Yeah, like Carlos was saying, it's already happening. You're starting to see it.
Well, you know, Tim Pool, somebody mentioned Tim Pool because I was talking about BlackRock, right? Because Tim Pool views the whole BlackRock situation as like, you know, conspiracy theory bullshit. And I'm not holding this against Tim Pool because he's just not very sophisticated in terms of the financial system. But insofar as he himself said that he was recently turned down for a home loan. And he mentioned that he actually had the cash to buy his home. And I wouldn't be surprised because he does very, very well on his show. You know, his career is booming. He's making money hand over fist probably. And so because of that, my thinking is that if somebody with as good a credit as him, with cash on hand, was not given a loan, then the banks are pretty much probably across the board reining in their mortgage loans because they know what's coming. And they don't want to have mortgage loans on their books. Now, the traditional way to shed a mortgage loan from your books is to sell it as a mortgage-backed security. But if everybody's realizing that a high inflationary regime is coming, then they are not going to want to buy mortgage-backed securities. On the contrary, they want to exit those instruments, and therefore banks will want to issue fewer loans, mortgage loans, because they'll know what's coming. See, and so I think that might be what the reason that Tim Pool didn't get a loan. This is total speculation on my part, but it seems reasonable. It seems like a reasonable abductive inference. Yeah. What else is on your mind, man?
No, that's all. Thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Yeah. Yeah. How are you seeing things, by the way, Alec?
Well, I'm starting to see gas prices go up little by little. I think.
Where are you, by the way? Just the state is fine.
Well, I'm living in Southern Illinois. I'm from the Chicagoland area. So gas, like for example, most of the time I spent down here the last 2 years have been like around 230 to 250. Now 329, and it's been rising up like every week, like twice a week. It slowly goes up. You could see it. Yeah.
You got to keep in mind that in the United States, which is such a large country, inflation will hit at different levels in different goods and services. Because there are some people who are saying that they're seeing gasoline at $5, but there might be supply issues such that would raise those prices there, whereas where you're at, it's only $3.20 and change, right?
Yeah.
So you got to keep that in mind. And so what's important is to sort of like gather as much information from as many sources as possible. That's why I'm asking you. Now, have you noticed any inflation insofar as labor prices is concerned?
Labor prices as in like worker wages or?
Yeah, worker wages.
I think the minimum here in Illinois is $12.
Yeah.
But that's something that was in the works since like 2012, I think. It's they have something where it's supposed to be $15 an hour by a certain year. I forget which year it was, but nobody wants to work though. As there's just you see like a lot of help wanted signs, and it's just they have trouble filling vacancies for like cashiers.
Yeah, because they're getting money from the government, right?
Yeah, there you go. Nobody really wants to work.
Why would they? Yeah, come on. Because somebody figured it out that they're basically getting paid not to work $17 an hour, i.e. the government money is equivalent to getting wages of $17 an hour. If you're getting that kind of money and, at a regular job, you'll get 12, then why would you work? It's stupid. And I think it's a fucking disaster, man. What can I say? Anyway, Alec, great talking to you, man. Take it easy.
Likewise. Take it easy.
Hey, Thomas, are you there? Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Thomas is apparently not there. Thomas, are you there? Okay, I'll add Steve-O, and we'll talk to Steve-O and assume that Thomas will come back at some point. Steve-O, you there?
Hey, Gonzalo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Hey, so I want to ask you, you said you think the euro is the future. As I understand it, the European Central Bank is still pushing negative interest rates, which is wacky and unsustainable. And I'm not fully versed in economics, but the way I understand it is that they went to a negative interest rate because they essentially they underpinned the euro to the dollar in the Federal Reserve, and they were betting that the U.S. would not go negative. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on why you think the euro is the future and the dollar is, well, we all see that the dollar is shaky, but it seems like if the dollar blows up, the euro is going to go with it, in my opinion.
Well, okay, I disagree. I'm putting out a video on Wednesday as to the specific reasons, but I'll give you just a quick overview. Basically, you got to understand, see, a fiat currency is necessary at this point because the global economy is so large that you cannot have money that is backed by gold because there is simply not enough gold or silver or any other precious metal.
I get that.
Okay. So, and fiat currencies have worked. A lot of the hard money people say, "Ooh, fiat money is bad, blah, blah, blah," but it fucking works. Okay. And you're seeing also with cryptocurrency, what is crypto? It's fucking fiat. It's based on nothing but hope. Okay. And so you got to understand that fiat currency in and of itself is not a bad thing. And you need a fiat currency at this stage because of the size of the global economy. Now, the Russians, for me, as I explained in the video, were the signal, because the Russians decided to exit dollar assets, but they said specifically that they were happy to sell their natural resources in euros and other currencies. And that would mean, of course, that they'll take euros, which makes complete sense. And since the Russians and the Chinese are so closely allied, an announcement as big as this is not something that the Russians would have done without consulting the Chinese. And so I think that the Chinese are using this as a passive signal that if worse comes to worse, they will no longer take dollars and they will take euros. Now, if this were to happen, the European Central Bank would be in this very, very good position of needing to print out a lot of fucking euros to meet the global demand for the euro as the reserve currency. If the US dollar hyperinflates, everybody would hop on the euro because it's the number 2 global currency. Nobody trusts the yuan, or the renminbi as it's sometimes called, which is the Chinese currency. Nobody trusts the ruble. Nobody trusts any other currency except the euro. Now, you mentioned that the European Union had negative interest rates because they were tied to American interest rates. That's not quite accurate. The Europeans have had negative interest rates because they're trying to stimulate spending, because they don't want the savings that's going on in Europe. And there are certain European economies, specifically Holland and Germany, where they tend to save more. I mean, Holland has got a huge surplus, and they keep that money, fresh and tidy. Okay, and so what happens is that the European Central Bank's negative interest rate regime has nothing to do with the United States interest rates, and has everything to do with stimulating spending in the eurozone. Okay, I mean that's their goal. Now, the Europeans have also been on a quantitative easing splurge, right? But it's been a lot more controlled than the American. And see, ultimately, and as I explained in the video that it's releasing on Wednesday for Patreons only, that the Germans in particular have a phobia for inflation that has long historical roots. And because of this, the Germans will never allow the euro to inflate. Never. They will never allow it. They would rather destroy the economies of Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, even France. Destroy France totally rather than have a soft currency. And so that's why I think that the euro is perfectly positioned to replace the dollar. And I think that if push comes to shove and the Europeans see it to their benefit, they'll ditch the dollar and hold up the euro as the reserve currency. And if the antagonism between China, Russia, and the United States continues apace, the Chinese will eventually come to a point, just as the Russians did, of saying, no dollars, we only take euros or other currencies. And that's lights out for the dollar, and that's lights on for the euro. Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking, and that's what I'm betting, quite frankly. But remember, this is my personal bet. This is not financial advice. You have to figure out for yourself what you think. Okay, Steve?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say one other thing. You talked about the JFK assassination. I heard one theory that there was also, he was pushing for, instead of a Federal Reserve note, he was pushing for a Treasury note.
That's hard money bullshit.
That's hard money bullshit.
Well, see, hard money guys who are pushing gold and shit like that, I know those guys real well. Back when I was doing economic commentary during like 2008 through 2011, 2012, and whenever it was that ended that, yeah, I met all those guys who are in the whole gold thing, okay? And these guys push all kinds of crazy-ass conspiracy theories. They have this thing about the Federal Reserve and fiat currency, okay? And it's, you got to keep in mind, see, the people who are pushing gold, they make money off of this trade. And so a lot of times they push gold with a lot of emotionalism to get people to get on board with their trade and buy gold. Okay. But the more, I mean, it's a little bit like the whole MRA pickup artists, manosphere crowd that they're pushing like various systems to pick up women and shit like that, or be more alpha and shit like that. They're kind of like a little bit of a scam. See, because like I'm not trying to sell you guys on shit. Okay. I don't have like some fucking program or some shit like, you know, do my program and, you know, you'll have a bigger dick and more hair and get all the chicks in 30 days. No, I'm not selling any of that bullshit, right? I'm just telling you my opinion and telling you what I think about different things and my points of view on different things that might help you. And even if you don't agree with what I'm saying, then you'll be able to say, no, I disagree for X, Y, and Z reason, and it'll make you think. And potentially,
Can I interject before I get out here? That wasn't really where I was going with that statement, but I've heard that like Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, they were also pushing to try to get oil traded in something other than dollars. So if the dollar's going to tank, and is the petrodollar going to go away and oil's going to be traded in something else? Or why would Russia get rid of their dollars while oil is still required to be bought and sold in dollars?
Well, no, it's not required to be bought and sold in dollars. Okay. It's because of the network effect. It started with Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries. The United States put pressure on Saudi Arabia to only sell their oil in dollars and park their excess dollars in treasury bonds. That was the 1974 Simon Agreement, okay, that created the petrodollar. Okay, so the OPEC countries, the other OPEC countries, the smaller ones like Kuwait and so forth, Iran at that time, they did the exact same thing as Saudi Arabia. And because of the network effect, it just became easy for all oil-producing countries to price their oil in dollars and sell it in the open market in dollars. Now, there have been various countries, like you mentioned, Iraq, Libya, during Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, that said and tried and actually did, in fact, sell their oil in different currencies rather than the dollar. By the way, the Saudis also sell oil in euros and a couple of other regional currencies. But just the majority of their oil is in dollars. They have these limited markets in other currencies just for practicality's sake. That has nothing to do with Saudi Arabia challenging the petrodollar. Okay, but anyway, the oil generally is sold in dollars, and also some other natural gas and so forth. But that the Russians decided that their sovereign wealth fund will not have any more dollar assets or trade in dollars. Doesn't mean that they're not going to accept dollars for their oil. It means that they're going to prefer other currencies. They haven't, as of yet, said that they are not accepting any more dollars for their oil or their natural gas. And do keep in mind, the Russians have, I believe, insofar as oil, they have like the fourth or fifth greatest reserves in the world. And insofar as natural gas, I think they are number one or number two behind Canada, some shit like that. Okay. So anyway, now to go back to the issue of the petrodollar, if it ends, before I talk about Iraq and Libya, or let me talk about Iraq and Libya real quick. The fact that both Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein were trying to get out of dollar denomination had to do because of the sanctions that were imposed on those countries. And because of that, if they accepted dollars, but they were disconnected from the SWIFT system of money transfers, the interbank money transfers, then it became like a whole fucking hassle because they would be getting all these dollars, but have nowhere to go with these dollars because they couldn't put them into the SWIFT system. And so they'd just be accumulating dollars, but not be able to spend the dollars. And of course, when you get paid, you want to spend that fucking money, right? And so that's why they wanted to get out of the dollar. Okay. Did that contribute to them being overthrown? Peripherally, marginally, but it wasn't the real reason that they were overthrown. On the one hand, Saddam Hussein was put up as the boogeyman by the George W. Bush administration. On the other hand, it was an ego thing with Gaddafi. It was an ego thing for Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration. So it wasn't that made them be overthrown. The hard money clique always says that that's the reason they were overthrown, but that's grossly oversimplifying the geopolitical situation in Iraq and Libya. Now, will the petrodollar end? Well, all things end eventually, okay? Would the oil-producing nations exit the dollar if the dollar devalues, inflates enough? Well, the two countries rather, that would never go off the dollar because of longstanding loyalty is Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. The Kuwaitis and the Saudis would never go off the dollar, and the Iraqis, of course. They will never go off the dollar. But that doesn't prevent them from raising the price of oil to whatever is necessary. Okay? I mean, you got to keep that in mind. They're not going to, keep the barrel of oil in a double-digit band. If inflation of the dollar skyrockets, if it goes, I don't know, 100%, 200%, 300%, the Kuwaitis and the Saudis, they're going to raise the price of oil. Okay? They'll get more dollars, of course, but they're still going to get paid. Yeah, fuck yeah. You see what I'm saying? So the petrodollar ending, not in the immediate future, not unless something cataclysmic were to happen, okay? But that the Chinese and the Russians exit the dollar insofar as purchasing oil, fuck yeah. That could happen, and very quickly, because if China and the United States go to war, one of the first things the Chinese would probably do is exit all of their dollar positions and go into some other currency, and they would exit their dollar positions and buy oil with some other currency from Iran and Russia. And they could easily meet their needs. Well, perhaps not easily, but they could meet their needs. Okay? And that would be that. I mean, that's my thinking. Okay? Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts. I'd like to hear from someone else. Take care. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Take it easy. Let's see here. What happened to Russell? No, Thomas. Thomas was it, right? He disappeared. Hey, Russell, how's it going?
Hey, Coach. Happy Saturday.
Good to see you.
Same. How to word this? Right. So you're talking about avoiding conspiracy theories, and I started watching Alex Jones a little bit more, and
He's
so
great.
yeah,
Alex Jones was right. They're turning the frogs gay.
Oh goodness. Right. So no, and you also put on your Telegram that a lot of the things that he did say turned out to be true about our TV spying on us and a bunch of other things. So I was just wondering, like how far would you believe in what Alex Jones is preaching, and then where would you kind of pump the brakes and say, okay, it's
when he
kind
talks
of
about lizard people, yeah, I mean, when he talks about lizard people, no, I'm not there. Okay, no,
Me
come
neither.
on. Okay, because I've met a lot of well-off people and whatnot. Not a one of them was a lizard. This is some old dude with a lot of money, but not a lizard. Okay, and so no, I don't believe in lizard people. And ergo, when he talks about lizard people, I'm like, come on, man. But that doesn't mean that he's wrong about everything. Okay, I mean, you have to use a little bit of common sense. Okay, and to how can I put it? See, Alex Jones is a carnival barker. There's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of times he talks about shit that it's actually useful to pay attention to it. Do I take his word on everything? No, I don't take his word on anything practically. But it's always nice to get the perspective of the carnival barker, of the jester, the court jester, the joker, because a lot of times he's going to be true. Okay, not every time, but a lot of times. Okay, I mean, look, what we're talking about here is whom do you believe? And my experience is that there is no one person who is always 100% true and accurate. No one person. Okay. There are some types who are closer to the truth, but there's no one person who has the truth every single fucking time. And you guys know that I believe in objective truth, but I also believe that there are different perspectives and different points of view on the truth. And your perspective could be accurate, but limited. And because of that limitation, you don't see the entire truth. You're not wrong. You just have a limited perspective because of your position. Right? Like Tim Pool and this BlackRock thing, right? He views it as a conspiracy, right? And I view it as like, no, this is a reasonable financial decision from the part of BlackRock. Okay. And so his perspective is more limited. He's not wrong. He's just more limited. But once you have a greater amount of information or more fuller information, then you can see the picture better and make a better assessment. Okay. And I forgot where I'm going with this, but Anyway, going back to the conspiracy theory, Alex Jones. I mean, he's funny. He's funny as fuck. But do I listen to everything he says? No, I don't even listen to him, to tell you the truth. But whenever some GIF or some meme of his pops up, I laugh. I listen to it, and I know a lot of times he's right. And yeah, that's my thinking on Alex Jones. Anything else on your mind, man?
Yeah, actually, this is very important, Coach. In response to your skanks video,
Yeah.
I'm gonna admit to something that, in hindsight, is pretty embarrassing.
You're a
So
girl. You're a trans man. Is that what you're going to admit to?
yes, yep, I'm definitely a trans man. Yep.
Me too. Me too. I'm a trans man. I was born XX chromosome, man, but I'm passing.
Vagina. No. So, Coach. So I started going to these cuck parties. So we're
what?
Yes, I started going to these cuck parties where cuck guys would bring their skanky women there, and so that they would watch them just get gangbanged. And
I can't believe this is real. You have gone to these parties?
Yes, I have. I know where to find them and so on and so forth. Right. But I wanted to let you know that your video on skanks helped set me straight. I no longer want to go to them. I don't want to be a part of that degeneracy. And for the record, yes, I have cucked a man right in front of him. As a matter of fact, she was on his lap. I was cucking him while she was on his lap. And anyways.
Good God. What the fuck is going on with Western civilization, man? This is okay. Tell me more. Tell me. I'm curious at this point.
Okay. So right. So I right. So I was
going to this cuck party.
What?
How did you wind up going to the cuck party?
I found out about this website called fetlife.com, and so I went there, and so it's basically this hive of kinks and immoral decadence and degeneracy. And so they had in one of their listings that they had a cuckold party, and so I was like, oh, let me go there.
You live near a major city. Don't tell me which one. I don't mean to dox you, but do you live near a major city?
I do, yeah.
Okay. I mean, how big is the city? 1 million people?
Huge.
Okay.
It is one of the most important cities in the world. I will say that.
Okay. So you live near New York City or LA. Okay, great.
Right. And right. And so for academic purposes, I decided to go to this cuckold party. And so I go there and so so this couple, they were an interracial couple, and so they were having this ambivalent conversation back and forth, like, oh, who do you want me to fuck?
What race were each of them?
So the guy was black and the girl was white. Okay. And so she is, sucking his dick, and so, but they're having this conversation back and forth of, oh, so who do you want me to fuck? I don't know. Who do you want to fuck? I don't know. Who do you want to blah, 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 blah. And so I finally volunteered myself, like, me, I'll do it. And I looked him dead in his eyes, and I swear to you, he looked back at me and says, yes, I give you full permission to fuck my girl. And so yeah, they move to the bedroom, and she's still sucking his dick. I get behind her, and so before I stick it in, she's just like, you have to wear a condom. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. And then after I had my turn, 4 or 5 other people had their turn.
Jesus Christ. I wouldn't be surprised. I've seen FetLife. And yeah, all kinds of craziness happens on that website. But Jesus, very interesting perspective. Good to know. And don't go there again. Yeah, you don't want to have anything to do with that. Anyway, Russell, take it easy. Good talking.
On that note, take care.
On that note, yeah. Take it easy, man. I'll catch you next time. Constantine, how's it going?
It's going great, but how can I
how can you top that?
How can I top that?
Yeah, I don't think you can, man. So talk about something else, man. Because if you're going to talk about your weekend with your girlfriend, that ain't going to cut it, man. What can I say?
Yeah, I have information if you want about the food prices before the COVID and right now.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in the Baltic states.
The Baltic states. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us.
Before that, I would go to like eat like, I don't know, dinner at this food place because it was cheap. And it cost me €3.20. Right now, it cost me €4.50.
Really?
So that's how much the cost has increased.
Yeah, very interesting.
So that's some economic information for you if you're interested.
Yeah, very interesting. Anything else have you noticed in terms of prices in Europe?
No, that's like the only thing I really care about is cheap food.
So what's on your mind?
When I was in your previous webinar about raising how to raise a son, I would suggest you to take your son to music school.
Yes,
because it requires a very strong discipline to achieve something.
Yes, it does.
Because I went 11 years in music school.
Yeah.
I played in symphonic orchestra, and I suggest to anyone to go and play in symphonic orchestra, because first of all, it's like 50-60 women there, so you can I don't know.
Yeah,
you want?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, you do have to work at it, but the flute players and violin players—they're always
violins. For violins, there are like at least 60. So you can choose.
Yeah,
and
good idea.
And I don't know. I read one of your banned books, like The Power of Sexual Surrender with Marian Robinson.
Yeah,
it was very, very interesting book, and I'm fascinated by it. Thank you.
Yeah, but very prohibited at this point. Oh yeah, people don't talk about that book at all. Yeah, I'm gonna do I should like read up and do a webinar on that book. Yeah, because it's worth reading. Yeah, The Power of Sexual Surrender, definitely. Yeah. Anyway, Constantine, anything else on your mind?
No. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Well, thank you. Take it easy. Hey, Seamus, you there?
Yes, I am.
How's it going?
Good. Yourself?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Where are you? You're from Africa, right?
Yes.
Nigeria?
Downtown Lagos, yeah.
Yeah, downtown Lagos.
There's parts of Ireland that are resembling downtown Lagos.
Okay. Yeah, that I'm aware of. Yeah, I'm hearing that parts of Ireland are just becoming like, not Ireland anymore. Anyway, what's on your mind, man?
Just a quick comment you were saying about it's quite plausible because the Germans always liked the idea of a strong, hard currency like the old Deutschmark.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and this is where the schism could occur again, or could reoccur with France. Basically, strong euro is really, really detrimental to Italy and their industry because they were always devaluing the lira.
Yeah,
for cheap exports. So if that happened, your scenario about the euro being this used for trade dollars, Italy would definitely leave. And if Italy leaves the eurozone, that's it. It's over.
No, I disagree. I think that the Germans view the euro as their fucking currency.
Okay? That's correct. Yeah.
And where is the European Central Bank? It's in Frankfurt, not Brussels. Okay.
Yeah.
Because for them, the euro has to be hard, and they won't allow it to get soft. And so my thinking is that they'd be happy to see every other country exit the eurozone, but they're not going to weaken the euro. Yeah, and if they see it as an opportunity to have the euro as the reserve currency, they'll take it. They'll do it.
Well,
and also,
actually,
what happens? What's important is that if the euro becomes the reserve currency, what'll happen is that there's going to be a global demand for the euro, and therefore the European Central Bank would be able to would actually, in fact, need to print a lot of euros to meet that demand. And so the way that they would do it is that, see, these European countries would issue euro bonds, and the central bank would buy up those bonds, and therefore the currency the currency base would expand, so that foreign countries would be able to use the euro as the currency, as the reserve currency, and that would allow a lot of these smaller European countries to have the cash to pay up for a lot of different programs that they have without weakening the currency. It would actually be a net benefit for a lot of the weaker Eurozone members. So it's not clear that these smaller countries would exit if the euro became the reserve currency. On the contrary, it might benefit them. And that's why the European Central Bank might, making this exact same calculation, figures itself, hey, you know, this might not be such a bad thing. Maybe we should pursue this. And thus, the interests of the Europeans and the Americans would diverge. And I think that that's something that the Chinese and the Russians would be very much in favor of. And the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which has separated German interest from American interests, I think that that would be like the first big move in this cleavage between Europe and America. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I was just about to say, I think you're onto something, because remember Christine Lagarde?
Yeah.
She has made comments. I found it on YouTube, and a kind of a throwaway comment at the end of an interview saying about, oh, well, if the dollar uses status, then the euro will be stronger, and we'd like that. She actually blurted that out, like.
Yeah.
So maybe they're that's part of their game plan too, you know.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
It could very well be. And look, these are ambitious people. And just because they're allied to the United States doesn't mean that they're friends of the United States. They don't give a fuck about the United States. They are allied to the United States to the degree that it is in their interest and benefit to be allied to the United States. If it's in their interest and benefit to not be allied to the United States and go their own way, they'll do so. They're grown-ups, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is Putin, he's supposed to meet Biden, Sleepy Joe, tomorrow, is it, or today? Or?
Yeah, tomorrow, I think, or the day after. I forgot. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that'll be fun. For body language alone.
Oh, man, that's going to be depressing. That's going to be really fucking depressing. Because, you know, I mean, whatever you think of Putin, right? He's on top of his game, okay?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I mean, he's got brains. He's prepared. He's a studious guy. He knows all the relevant facts of any given situation. He's thought through all of the permutations of any given situation. He's a smart man. And Biden, man, he is senile. This poor man is senile. You know, it's gonna be.
And Putin, have you noticed, right? Putin, when he's been interviewed, he does this trick, right? But it's. I actually laugh at it every time. He pretends that he doesn't understand, that he has to get a translator through the headphones to understand the other guys. He knows exactly what they're saying.
Yeah, he speaks fluent English and German.
Okay? Yeah. That's only to give himself more time.
Yeah,
to,
he's a smart customer. He's a really smart. He's the smartest man of the global leaders. I personally think that he's the smartest of them all. I don't think any guy. Yeah, and so, you know, if you're gonna play with him, you know, you're playing with the varsity. Okay, don't fuck with him. And I think that you know, it's going to be embarrassing. And I think also Putin wants to meet with Biden because he wants to get a measure of Biden and the people around him, especially. He wants to get a sense of like who's really running shit. And and I think that probably Putin's priority is going to be, he wants to meet Kamala Harris. Yeah, you know, Kamala Harris has never been to fucking Europe. I can't fucking believe that. That's insane.
Maybe on a hotel trip with some politician or something, maybe.
No, not even. She's never been to Europe.
Back in the day, you know, it was an expensive
when she was a whore. Yeah.
I was going to say,
No,
she's like Meghan Markle or something.
Oh yeah, that's fucking embarrassing. Yeah. You know, and by the way, Harry, what a fucking cuck! What a weakling!
What you see with that guy Noel Gallagher called him a beta male or something the other day?
Yeah. Did anybody disagree with Noel Gallagher?
No.
Yeah, he's dead right. He's dead fucking right.
But I tried to place a bet with a betting company about the odds of a divorce, and they wouldn't take the bet. Not
No,
one
of course
company would
not.
take the bet. But I was like, come on, they take bets on all sorts of stupid shit.
Well,
They
yeah,
wouldn't take
I
the
would
bet.
figure that they take a bet in like when the divorce is going to happen, not if, because if that's no bet at
Yeah.
all. It's only a matter of when, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
And can you believe how crass to name their new kid Lilibet Diana? How crass, how exploitative, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that guy, man, he is so pathetic. Jesus
Is he
Christ.
going to wait? Do you think maybe you should do a video like when Harry wakes up, will he just have this cold sweat? What the hell happened to me? Where did I go wrong? I blame his brother.
Video.
His brother should have had this conversation with him. Hey man, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah, the thing is he's burned his bridge with his old man, right?
yeah.
I mean, totally burned it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just basically saying that his father was a piece of shit, telling it to Oprah of all people, right?
Oh my god, yeah.
Oh man, you don't recover the relationship
See,
after.
I have a theory, right? That guys with red hair, because I know several guys that married half mixed race women,
Yeah,
more black than white, and they all have red hair.
really? That's
Yeah,
interesting.
they have this kind of obsession with, they don't like their ginger red hair and they're really pasty, so they're super attracted to darker skinned women.
That's weird.
It's just a thing I've noticed. Yeah.
I'll take your word for it, because I
Yeah.
have no, I don't know anybody who's red haired, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
a lot of minorities.
blondes.
So.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
I know a lot of blondes, but I don't know any redheads now that I think about it.
Yeah,
So-
red-haired men. It's red-haired men. They have this kind of secret desire for darker skinned women. Like it might be Brazilian or,
Yeah. That's just weird. Yeah, I mean, he married the wrong fucking woman, man. Jesus, this fucker had any chick, any girl, and he married exactly the wrong kind. I mean, oh man, it's a
because he had it too easy. He had it too easy. You see.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Boys, let this be a lesson to you. You know, when you have it too easy, this is what happens to you. You married the wrong fucking woman. That's what fucking happens to you.
And he had the obsession with the dark skin. That's what I
Well, and he's out there in fucking Santa Barbara, isolated from all of his friends, you know. And now he's totally antagonized all the people close to him. I mean, I've heard from some people in England that like the high society people think that he's a fucking joke and want nothing to do with him. You know, I mean, the guy's just burned every fucking bridge for what? For a fucking skank, you know? Oh man. Anyway, Seamus, great talking to you, man. I hope to see you next week. Okay?
Thank you. See you.
Take it easy. And Sharma, you're the last of the day. Sharma, you there?
Yes, coach. Can you hear me?
Yeah. How's it going, man?
I'm all right. And yourself?
Pretty good. Pretty good. What's on your mind, my man?
Since you posted last video about we being irrational and most of the time run by emotion, it sparked an interest because okay, I'm going in all sorts of directions. So one time you posted that how you created Patreon because you wanted to be transactional, and that had a personal impact on me because I never saw it the way before you said that. And I've been listening to Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged. There, this one character goes telling another main character that how money is a tool, and people use money in exchange of each other's effort. And I wouldn't have stumbled upon all these things. So would you be in future able to make a video that can shed a light on topic like this? I mean, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I'm thinking that there are many guys would be like this who don't know about this simple principle, like a short video or a webinar, or if there's anything you can personally suggest me to look into, I would like to do the work.
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I'll have to think about it because I've never really given it much thought. Because like, for those of you who don't know, I forget where I said that I wanted my relationship on Patreon to be very transactional in the sense of I give extra videos and the weekly webinar in return for money, but not like a favor. Not like I didn't want to get any money from Patreon like for pity points. I wanted to do, I do work and I get paid. Okay. And you pay me for the content that I provide on Patreon. Because a lot of other people who have a Patreon will basically say, oh, please give me money, but for no reason, just give them money because you like them. Now, if you like me and give me money, thank you. I appreciate it very much, but I don't want that. I want it to be like I do something and I get money in return. So transactional in that sense. Now, and of course, I'm trying to do the best I can insofar as the videos and the presentations that I give you guys. I mean, I want it to be that you feel that you're getting good value for money. Now, insofar as where to read up more on like a philosophy of money, well, Ayn Rand has written a lot about it. The only objection I have to Ayn Rand is that she completely discounts the issue of community and how human beings are dependent on our social group. Because of her own personal issues, she just doesn't want to acknowledge that human beings depend on other people. And my thinking has been, and it's been evolving quite a bit because I've given it a lot more thought for various reasons. But you see, we have the need for collective security. We cannot survive individually. We need others to survive. This has always been the case. That's why women marry men, because women cannot get the resources for her own survival and the survival of her children. She needs a guy. And men need other men, other groups of people, a tribe, a nation, because we cannot survive on our own. We need other people to help us survive. And yet at the same time, though we need collective security, we have the desire for individual achievement and individual ambition. We want to achieve and achieve certain things. And so this tension between, on the one hand, needing collective security, and on the other hand, needing enough freedom individually so as to pursue our own desires, that's the constant tension in human society. Ayn Rand is far in the individualist sphere. And it's no surprise that she's a total anti-communist, because idealistic communism, not practical communism, but idealistic communism as it's envisioned by its most idealistic adherents, is completely on the opposite end. It's totally collectivist, of collective security. And so Ayn Rand is great to read, especially if you come from a more collectivist background or collectivist dominated outlook. But you have to balance the two, because ultimately, in my point of view, and I'm writing this nonfiction book precisely on this particular issue, all of life is this balance between collective security and individual freedom to achieve what you want. It's always this balance, and it defines morality, as I'll explain in this book that I'm writing. And yeah, so to go too far down one side, the collectivist side leads you to Marxism, which leads to the communist state and the egregious violations of the communist state. And on the flip side, going too far the individualist route of Ayn Rand leads you down to this extreme selfishness that will ultimately lead to a revolt. And actually, I think that part of the reason that we're having this leftist surge, this communist surge in the Western democracies, is precisely because we've been too individualistic for too long, and too many people have been left behind, and their resentment has grown to such a point that they're expressing it with this desire for socialism, communism, collectivism, wokester shit. And that's my thinking. So yeah. So anyway, this has been a long-winded way of trying to answer what you're saying. But to go back to your point, Sharma, I think that what you should be doing is read Ayn Rand, sure, but be aware of the criticisms of her, and be willing to read up on those critics to see what they have to say about her, because a lot of their points are true, just as a lot of the points that Ayn Rand makes are accurate. Now, insofar as philosophy of money is concerned, actually, I can't think of anybody. I mean, the only one I can think of offhand is David Ricardo, and that shit is snowy as fuck. So yeah, I'm not any help on that regard, though. Sorry. Jesus
No, no,
Christ,
no, it's
long
okay.
to say, no, I can't help you. Sorry.
No, coach. But that advice was good because I do realize sometimes that when she was like narrating the story, I mean, when she wrote the book,
Yeah.
she kind of discounts the basic human nature of how the dynamics go. Like, oh, this guy said this. It's more about I want this. I'm gonna get this, and fuck you. Doesn't happen all the time. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I would use that.
Yeah, no problem. So great talking to you, Sharma. Hope to see you next week. Take it easy.
Yeah, bye.
Okay, boys and girls, I'm going to call it end to the broadcast because I'm a bit fried and we've been going on almost 3 hours. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And like I said, the video on Wednesday is going to be on the euro and why I exited dollars to go into euro. And so, yeah, look forward to talking to you next Sunday. And that's it. Take it easy.